The slides were dead, the caterer had ghosted us, and the investor from Mercer Capital sat at the wrong table, wearing a face like a locked door. My phone would not stop buzzing. 3 messages at a time. A landlord's knock from someone who owns the building. Ren. The slides. Now, the screen said. I answered with one thumb, while my other hand held a phone to my ear, coaxing a catering manager off the ledge of quitting on the spot. 2 minutes, I told Yuna, which was a lie. I had said 2 minutes about 4 minutes ago. I lied to her about time, like a parent stalling a car-sick kid, almost there when we are nowhere close. It keeps the screaming down, and I have had plenty of practice. Nobody in that ballroom knew the secret of the evening. I was not staff. Nobody was paying me. On paper, I was a guest, the best friend, the +1 who showed up 3 hours early to help. In practice, I was the reason the lights were on. For 7 years, I had been the person Yuna Takamori called when something caught fire. A bad venue, worse press, a vendor who wanted to be paid, a speech she had not written yet. I put it out, and she thanked me by letting me stand near her while she glowed. Tonight was her promotion. Vice President of the Takamori Future Foundation, the youth arm of her mother's empire. A room full of investors, half the executive floor, and cameras that only pointed one direction. At the center table, calm as still water, sat the reason my hands were sweating. Reika Takamori, the CEO Yuna's mother, and the closest thing this city had to weather. Something you planned your life around and never argued with. I had shared rooms with her maybe a dozen times across the years, always at the edges, always invisible. People said she could read a face like a balance sheet, and a balance sheet like a face. She had the quiet that expensive people have, the kind that makes everyone else talk too much. Yuna wanted this night to be flawless in front of that woman more than she wanted air. So of course, 40 minutes before doors, the centerpiece had died. The whole event was built around one video, a glossy little film about the Foundation's flagship youth center, the place every report swore was thriving. Kids coding, kids building, a bright room stuffed with futures. That reel would play, the investors would melt, and Yuna would shine. Except the file was corrupt. It would not open, and neither would the backup, which meant someone was about to rebuild it from scratch. That someone is always me. Fix the video, Yuna hissed, arriving at my elbow in a dress that cost more than my car. You always fix it, so fix it. The source is gone, Yuna, both copies. I would be rebuilding the whole thing from raw clips. Then rebuild it. You have the folder. And I did have the folder because I had backed up her project months ago when she forgot. I always had the folder. That was the entire tragedy of me, packed into one sentence. Then she squeezed my arm and dropped into the voice she saved for when she truly needed something. Soft, almost warm. Ren, please, just make it work for me. An idiot that I was, my whole body said yes before my brain could raise a hand to vote. I found a corner near the loading dock and started stitching a 2-minute film together on a borrowed laptop in a rented tuxedo, with a napkin over my knee so I would not smear anything. That is where Haruto found me. Haruto Nishida runs events for a living, real ones, and tonight he was here wrangling the stage crew. He looked at my screen, then at me, with the face of a man watching a friend pay a stranger's parking ticket for the 100th time. You are doing her job again, he said. A favor is when you help a guy carry a couch. This is when you buy the couch, carry the couch, and then applaud while he tells everyone he built it. I did not argue because I was reading the script that ran under the footage, and something in it had started to itch. Listen to this line, I said. The Aoba Center empowers synergized youth pathways towards scalable tomorrow outcomes. Haruto blinked slowly. Did a brochure eat a thesaurus and throw it back up? It does not say anything, though. Read the whole thing. It never names one kid. Never names one project. 2 minutes of pretty light and not a single human being inside it. Maybe the writer was lazy, he offered. Maybe. I let it go, because I had a fire in front of me and no time for a smaller one. But I filed it somewhere in the back of my head, next to every smell that is almost, but not quite, gas. I was so deep in the edit that I did not notice the woman at my shoulder until she spoke, and when she did, my spine went straight without my permission. You reversed the color grade on the 3rd clip so the room reads warmer. That was a smart choice. Sharp suit, tablet, earpiece, and the flat, unbothered eyes of someone who has canceled better men than me before lunch. Kaori Shibata, Reika's chief of staff and her human shield. The original grade made the kids look cold, I said. Cold reads like a stock photo. Warm reads like it happened. She asked which firm I was with, and I told her I was not with any firm at all, which made her tilt her head a careful few degrees. Freelance then. Do you have a card I can pass along? And there it was, a small and stupid thing that landed far harder than it should have. She thought I was a professional, a hired one, someone who got paid actual money to be this good. For 7 years, the Takamori world had looked past me like I was a coat rack in the corner. This woman watched my hands for 30 seconds and assumed I was a person who mattered. I am just a friend of Yuna's, I said, and something flickered across Kari's face. It vanished fast, but I caught it. It was not respect leaving. It was pity arriving. Ms. Takamori notices who actually carries a room, she said. Meaning Reika, not Yuna. For whatever that is worth to you. Then she was gone, back to the center table, and I sat there with a finished video and a fresh bruise I had not known I was carrying until she pressed it. I delivered the rebuilt film with 90 seconds to spare, then made the stage crew reload it twice while I watched, because a thing that dies once will always try again. I texted the investor's assistant a corrected seating card, carried in the first 2 trays myself so the appetizers would land before the speeches, and nudged the microphone a hand's width left so Yuna would not knock it when she gestured, which she always does. Then I stepped back into the dark at the edge of the room and watched Yuna Takamori walk into a spotlight I had built for her with my own 2 hands. She was radiant. She always is. Charisma is her one true talent. And it is not a small one. The video played, warm and human, and the room made that soft sound crowds make when they are being sold something they already wanted to believe. The investor from Mercer Capital slowly uncrossed his arms. Reika watched her daughter with an expression I could not begin to read. And against every scrap of self-respect I owned, I felt proud. Not of me, of her. That is the sickness of fixing for someone too long. Their wins start to taste like they belong to you, and you forget to ask why you are still hungry. Then Yuna raised her glass for the toast, and the sickness broke in a single clean line. I have to thank the whole team, she said, glowing. But honestly, the person who really saved tonight is my Ren. Heads turned, hunting for me in the dark, and my face went hot. For half a second, I let myself believe she was about to say my name, like it belonged to a person and not a tool. My best friend, she went on, sparkling. And my very own free personal assistant. Every diva needs one. Mine works for compliments and leftovers. The room laughed. Truly, if the coffee is warm and the chairs are straight, thank Ren. He lives to make me look good. Nobody steal him. The laughter rolled through the ballroom, easy and warm and cruel, and I stood in the dark being applauded like a clever dog that had learned to fetch a marriage. Free personal assistant, my little fixer. He lives to make me look good. 7 years of my life, folded neat into a punchline in front of every single person she had ever wanted to impress. I did not feel rage, and that surprised me. What settled over me was quieter and much heavier, a coat lined with lead. Strangely, it felt close to relief. The relief of finally seeing the true shape of the room you have been standing inside of for years. I might have swallowed it. I had swallowed worse, with a smile, more times than I can count. But the night was not finished with me, and neither was she. The live product demo, the real closer for Mercer Capital, hit a snag. A cable, a driver, the kind of nothing I could fix in my sleep. The big screen flashed a dead blue, and the room's warm mood started to cool at the edges, like a plate of food nobody was eating. Yuna found me at the edge with her eyes, and then she did the thing she had done 1,000 times without ever once thinking about it. She snapped her fingers, twice, toward me. Fix it. Some gestures tell you everything a person has ever thought about you. A whole worldview can live in the space between 2 fingers. For 7 years, those fingers had slid me around rooms like a chess piece, and my feet, out of pure animal habit, had already started to move. I stopped. I stood there in the dark, and I did not go. Yuna snapped again, harder, the smile cracking at its corners as the silence stretched, and the investor slowly, meaningfully checked his watch. I did walk toward her then, and the relief on her face lasted only as long as it took her to see I was not stopping at the stage. I went past the dead screen, past the microphone, straight down the aisle toward the doors. Ren, she said into the mic, forcing a laugh over it. Ren, where are you going? The screen. I turned around, and the whole room was watching now. Reika was watching, so I let them all hear it. Fix it yourself, I said. Not loud. I did not need loud, because the room had gone quiet enough to carry a whisper to the back wall. I am not your assistant. I never was. And starting tonight, I am not your fixer either. You are being dramatic. Come here, Ren. But I was finished coming when she called for me. I came here for 7 years, Yuna. My own voice stayed steady, almost gentle, and it scared me how calm a man can sound while he sets down the heaviest thing he owns. Straighten your own chairs from now on. Then I walked out, and I left the screen dead behind me, and the machine that made Yuna Takamori look brilliant picked up its coat and left the building for good. Behind me, the demo stayed broken. I heard it in the sound of the room, that awful social wilting, and then the investor's polite voice saying he would follow up by email. That is the sentence money uses when it has already decided to leave and does not want a scene about it. Her perfect night cracked straight down the middle, and I was not there to catch the falling pieces or apologize for the crack. I wish I could tell you I felt like a conqueror. I did not. I stood in the parking garage with my hands shaking and no idea at all who I was supposed to be now. For 7 years, my identity had a name printed on it, and the name was hers. Take that away, and I was a man in a rented tuxedo, with nowhere in particular to be, and no one waiting to see if he got there. I had won nothing tonight. I had only put something down. And setting down a weight that heavy leaves your arms feeling strange and light and hollow, which is not the same feeling as free, no matter what anyone tells you. What I could not see, busy as I was having the loneliest victory of my life, was the center table I had left behind. Reika Takamori had not looked at the broken screen once. She had watched her daughter's face the entire time, and she had seen something that unsettled her far more than a dead demo ever could. When I walked out, Yuna had not looked heartbroken. She had not worn the face of a woman losing her oldest friend. She had worn the face of a woman who had just been robbed, and the stolen item had legs and a name and had chosen to use them. Reika had spent years telling herself her daughter was merely spirited, merely young, merely hungry in a way that success would eventually feed. Watching Yuna's mouth tighten into pure ownership, she felt a small cold door swing open somewhere she had long refused to look. I had almost reached my car when I heard heels on concrete, fast and exact, the sound of a person who does not permit herself to be out of breath. Kari Shibata again, Mr. Aizawa. So she had learned my full name in the last hour. Ms. Takamori would like a word, not Yuna. Reika. Every reflex I owned told me to get in the car and drive. I had just resigned from the entire Takamori family in front of a ballroom. The last thing I wanted was the head of it summoning me to account for the crime. If she wants to defend her daughter, I said, I do not have the strength for it tonight. She will not. Kaori's voice was dry as an old ledger. In my experience, she rarely explains, and she never defends. She has a problem, and she suspects you may be the only person in that room capable of seeing it as it truly is. And Reika did not send Kari back to fetch me. She came herself, walking into the garage in a way that made the ugly gray concrete feel like it ought to straighten up and apologize for its condition. She read me for a slow, unhurried beat, and I understood at last what people meant about her. Being read by Reika Takamori was like standing in a lit doorway at night, knowing whoever stood outside could see everything while you saw nothing at all. You rebuilt an entire film in 40 minutes, and then you refused to fix a single cable, she said. Most people are cowards in a single direction. You managed to be brave and foolish in the very same evening. It has been a long night, I said. She did not soften an inch. My daughter humiliated you in public. I made myself hold her gaze. She did, in front of everyone. And instead of making a scene, you set the tool down and walked away from the one person who needed you most. She studied me like a page with a small discrepancy on it. Do you understand how rare that is? People adore being needed. It is the last addiction anyone ever quits, and most of them never do. I had nothing to say, because she had just described the precise shape of my entire life, and hearing it from a stranger was like catching my reflection in a window I had walked past 1,000 times. I am not here about Yuna, Reika said. I am here to hire you, properly, a contract, a fee, all of it, since you appear to have just discovered you have a price after all. I almost laughed. Hire me for what then? The foundation runs a flagship youth center, the Aoba Innovation Center, the same one from the film you saved tonight. She let that sit for a beat. Its numbers are perfect. Attendance, outcomes, spending. Every quarter for 2 years, perfect. Most people would call that good news, I said, and she almost smiled, which on her face registered as a small seismic event. I have run companies for 20 years, Mr. Aizawa. Nothing real is ever perfect. Perfect is only ever the face a thing wears in the last moment before you learn it was never truly there. Her eyes did not move off mine. I want you to walk inside those numbers as a complete outsider and tell me what is really standing in that room. And this is the part I have never confessed to anyone. Some quiet corner of me had already heard Haruto reading that hollow script, 2 minutes of light with no child's name in it, and had started doing the math on its own. "When would you want me there?" I asked, and I heard the answer inside my own question before she gave hers. "Tomorrow," Reika said. She was already turning to go when she added the last thing, without looking back, the sentence that pulled the pin loose. "Do try to come back with the truth. I have a strange feeling nobody in my company has handed me one of those in a very long time." The Ioba Innovation Center sat on a good street, wedged between a bank and a bakery, with a glass front and a banner so new the fold creases still showed. From the sidewalk, it looked like 2 flawless years of quarterly reports made solid. That was the first thing that bothered me. I had done this kind of walkthrough 100 times for Yuna, off the books, for free. Today, a signed contract sat in my jacket and a fee with real commas in it, and the paperwork made me more nervous, not less. A favor you can walk away from. A job puts your name on the wreckage. Haruto came with me because I wanted a second set of eyes, and because his eyes have never once believed a brochure. He stood at the glass and read the banner out loud like it had personally insulted him. "Building tomorrow's builders, today," he said. "That is not a sentence, Ren. That is a screensaver with ambitions." The door was unlocked. Inside, the air had the sealed, museum stillness of a room that has not held a crowd in a very long time. Clean floors, new chairs, most still wrapped in the plastic they shipped in. A reception desk with nobody behind it. There was one human being in the whole flagship of youth innovation, and he was a security guard named Toma, who stood up so fast when he saw us that his chair rolled away and hit the wall. "Are you here for the walkthrough?" "The visit is this afternoon," he said. "I was told nobody comes in the mornings." "Nobody comes in the mornings," I repeated. "What about the afternoons, Toma?" He answered with the pure honesty of a man nobody had thought to coach. "The cleaners. And on visit days, the photo people. They bring the plants in a van, and they take the plants away again after." Haruto looked at me. "They take the plants away again after," he said, laying the words down like a card on a table. I kept Toma talking, because guards see everything and get asked nothing. On visit days, he told me, a busload of teenagers arrived in the morning, were handed pizza and matching shirts, and sat at the benches for the cameras. By lunch, they were gone, the shirts collected at the door, the pizza boxes tossed in the dumpster out back. Different kids, most times. He had wondered about it in the mild way you wonder about weather. That is not your problem. One boy, he said, had asked on his way out when the real classes started, and Toma had told him soon. He looked at me as he repeated it, and I watched him realize that soon had been a lie he handed on without ever knowing he held it. "Do the kids ever come back the next day?" I asked, and Toma frowned, working it out. "No," he said, surprised by his own answer. "They never come back. I always figured they graduated to something." "Did they not?" "No," I said. "They did not graduate to anything." And I felt the first real weight of this settle on me, because Toma was going to feel stupid later, and he had done nothing wrong except believe the building he was paid to guard. We went deeper in. A glass wall said Maker Lab, and behind it stood 3 long benches, spotless, and a stack of boxes in the corner. I crouched and read the shipping labels. The tape had gone yellow at the edges. "These printers were delivered 8 months ago," I said. "Nobody has opened them." Haruto tapped a label. "Every status report for 3 quarters says the equipment is in transit. It has been in transit for 8 months, standing perfectly still in this exact corner. That is the most relaxed shipment in history." That is the thing about a good lie. It has to keep moving on paper, so nobody notices it never moves in the world. The next room was worse because it tried harder. A coding classroom, a wall of student projects framed and proud behind glass. Except every project was a stock printout, the same 3 cheerful diagrams you can buy in a template pack. Rows of laptops, still sealed in their boxes, and a whiteboard with a full week of classes laid out in dry marker. The schedule had not been touched in months. You can tell. Real schedules get smudged, corrected, argued with. This one was pristine, a photograph of a week that never happened, propped up and waiting for a camera. "Somebody decorated a lie," Haruto said, low, and he was not joking now. "They did more than cook the numbers. They built a diorama and pointed a lens at it." I found the guest book on the reception desk, thick, the kind schools use, and started turning pages. Attendance, names, dates, small signatures, page after page of eager young minds. It took me under a minute. Haruto, the handwriting. He looked, then he looked at me again, slower. Every name on every page. Weeks of them, The loop of every single letter had come from one hand. Somebody had sat down and invented a whole year of children with a single pen and a sore wrist. Okay, he said, this is not lazy paperwork. This is a stage set. Somebody rented a room and dressed it up as a childhood. I should have felt like a detective. What I felt was sick, because I already knew whose project this was, and I knew whose signature was going to be waiting at the bottom of it. I was still holding the guest book when the front door opened, and a warm, unhurried voice said, "You must be the outside consultant. I have heard so much about you already." He was tall and expensive, and calm in a rehearsed way, the calm of a knife. Charcoal suit, no tie, a face built for closing rooms. He offered his hand like a gift I would be a fool to refuse. Shun Kuroda, Director of Strategy. A small, proud pause, and Yuna's fiancé. The foundation's investor relations run through my office, so anything that touches these centers eventually touches my desk. So this was Shun. Yuna talked about him like a storm she was proud of having survived. I shook his hand and felt nothing move behind his eyes at all. "You are here early," he said pleasantly. "The site visit is this afternoon. Grant renewal, very sensitive. I would hate for a first impression to form in an empty building on a slow morning." "How many of the mornings are slow?" I asked. "And the afternoons?" Shun smiled with his mouth only. "May I call you Ren?" Yuna does. This center is simply between cohorts. Programs breathe in and out, you see. The equipment is in transit. The intake starts soon, and the figures reflect the real impact of the pilot phase, which was extraordinary. He said all of it without one breath of hesitation, which is its own kind of confession. The printers came 8 months ago. The intake never happened. The guest book is one person's handwriting, I said. That is not a cohort breathing. That is a room holding its breath and hoping. For a heartbeat, something crossed his face. Not guilt. Arithmetic. He was pricing me. Then he set a hand on my shoulder like an older brother, steadying a boy about to do something rash. "Every young program has discrepancies in its records," he said smoothly. "Let me handle the reconciliation. Give me your findings, and I will fold them into the audit trail properly, so nobody mistakes a scheduling gap for something uglier. You are new to how these things are documented. I am not." He was offering to lift the truth off my hands and file it somewhere no one would ever find it, and he offered it as a courtesy. It was the most dangerous sentence anyone had spoken to me all week. "I already have someone I report to," I said. "I will hand it to her directly." "You could make this very easy for yourself," Shun added, still smiling, "or very hard. New people always think hard is the brave choice. Mostly, it is only the slow one." "I have gotten good at slow," I said. "Ask the woman you are about to marry." The warmth in his face dropped by 2 degrees, which for Shun, I would come to learn, counts as a scream. "Of course," he said. "I only want what is best for the foundation. And for Yuna." Then Reika arrived and the room rearranged itself around her without being asked. She had come herself, no entourage, only Kaori a step behind with a tablet. On the phone, she had said she wanted to see it with her own eyes, and I understood now that she had not entirely believed me. Some part of her had driven across the city hoping I was wrong. She stood in the middle of the empty maker lab and turned a slow circle. Wrapped chairs, unopened boxes, a desk with nobody at it. She read 3 pages of the guest book, then closed it very gently, as if it were sleeping. "Shun," she said, without heat. "Where are the children?" He reached for the cohort answer, smooth and immediate. "Miss Takamori, this is a quiet stretch. The model implies a natural lull in." "Where are the children, Shun?" She did not raise her voice. She lowered it, and the temperature of the room went with it. "This center reported 400 served last quarter. I am standing inside it. I count 1 guard and a wall of plants that arrive by van on the days I visit." He started to answer, and she lifted 1 finger, and he stopped. I have never seen a man that polished go that quiet that quickly. She turned to me, and for a moment the CEO was not there. What stood in the empty room was a woman who had come hoping to be let down by a consultant and had instead been let down by something far closer to home. "You were right," she said. "I did not want you to be." "For what it is worth," I answered, "neither did I." And for a breath, neither of us was a consultant or a CEO, only 2 people standing in a room that had lied to both of us. That was when I found the file cabinet in the back office. It was not locked. I was a consultant on a signed contract, standing in a foundation building I had every right to enter. Nothing I opened that morning was a secret I stole. It was a mess someone had left behind, certain no one would ever be paid to walk in and read it closely. Inside were the build-out invoices. A company called Bright Path Contractors contractors had billed the foundation for a full renovation, lab equipment, staffing, and youth stipends, quarter after quarter. Large numbers, clean numbers, paid in full, for a room with plastic still on the chairs. And Ioba was not alone. Behind its folder sat others, thinner, for 3 more programs across the city, each with the same bright path letterhead, the same tidy math, the same signature. Whatever this was, it had not happened once. It had a rhythm. Haruto did the arithmetic out loud, because someone had to. 4 programs, 2 years. If every quarter looks like this one, that is not a rounding error, Ren. That is a budget the size of a small school district, spent on plants and pizza, and one very tired pen. I thought about the real kids who could have filled these rooms, the ones on a waiting list somewhere, while the money meant for them paid a contractor to build nothing. That was the part that turned my stomach. Not the theft of the numbers, the theft of the afternoons. I pulled the top contract and turned it toward the light. 2 things sat at the bottom of the page. The approval routing, stamped through the Office of Strategy, which was Shun's office, and the authorizing signature above the foundation seal. Yuna Takamori. In the big looping hand, I had watched sign birthday cards, lease agreements, and once a complaint against a rival who did not exist. I did not say a word. I turned the page so Reika could see it. She looked at her daughter's name on the money that built a center that was never built. And for one breath, the most powerful woman I had ever met wore the face of every parent who stumbles onto the thing they spent years teaching themselves not to see. Cancel the afternoon visit, she told Shun, not turning around. Tell the grant office there is a facilities issue. That will raise questions, Shun warned. Good, said Reika. I am full of them, and I have kept them to myself for far too long. He left to make his calls, and I watched him go, and I caught the exact moment his walk changed once he believed no one was looking. Smooth became fast. A man does not hurry unless a clock he set has started counting down for him too. Haruto found me at the cabinet and pressed a thin folder into my hands. One name keeps showing up on the only honest paper in this whole building, not a company, a person. Whoever ran the single real event this place ever had. The folder held photographs from one day, more than a year ago. A room full of actual teenagers, laughing, building something out of cardboard and cheap motors, under a banner that had not yet faded. Real kids, one real afternoon. Stapled behind them was a sign-in sheet in a different, human, ordinary hand, and a short resignation letter. The coordinator who arranged that single genuine day had quit 2 weeks later, asking in one careful line that the photographs not be used to sell a future no one intended to build. The name signed at the bottom in that plain and human hand was Miki Nagase. It meant nothing to me that morning. She was the one person who could end all of this, and the one I would end up hurting the worst, and I would learn both of those things far too late. Reika read it over my shoulder. They borrowed real children for one afternoon, she said slowly, to photograph a future they had no plan to build. And when the woman who brought those children objected, she walked out. And the photos got used anyway, I said. You watched them last night, on a screen, at a party thrown to celebrate all of it. Something shifted in Reika, and it was not the CEO deciding to shield the company. It was a person deciding to protect the truth, even with her own daughter's signature sitting on top of it. I cannot run this investigation, she said. The moment it involves Yuna, mine are the least trustworthy hands in the building. Whatever I touch, they will call it a mother covering for her child, or a mother destroying a rival for the throne. I have to step all the way back. That means you cannot protect me either, I said. No authority, no shield. None, she agreed, and I respected her for not softening it. I will bring in an independent auditor, someone with no reason to love me or fear me. And you stay right where you are, Mr. Aizawa. Outside, clean, the one set of hands nobody can accuse of belonging to me. Kari, who had not said a word all morning, spoke without lifting her eyes from her tablet. For the record, the optics here are poor. You have hired the man your daughter mocked on a stage last night, and now he stands inside her fraud with your blessing. She will not hear the word consultant. She will hear betrayal. Then she will hear it wrong, Reika said, as she usually does. But something moved behind her eyes, the private worry of a mother who knew her daughter kept a ledger of every slight. I thought about Yuna learning this, not the fraud, the other thing, that her mother had crossed a room and chosen me, her free personal assistant, to carry the weight she could not touch herself. I almost pitied whoever had to tell her first. I looked around the empty room one more time, at the wrapped chairs and the boxes that had traveled 8 months without moving, and I understood that I had stepped, on purpose, across a line, onto the far side from the person I had served for 7 years. Yuna's name was on the money. Reika stood on my side of the room, and somewhere across the city, a phone was about to ring for a woman I did not yet know, an auditor whose job would be to prove what a mother was no longer allowed to say out loud. "Before you call anyone," I said, because it had been sitting in my chest since the guest book, "you should know Shun offered to make all of this vanish before you arrived," calmly, like a man who had done it before. Reika lowered the phone a fraction. "Then he has," she said, "which means my daughter is not the center of this. She is standing in front of it. Find out what is behind her, Mr. Aizawa, before it decides she is easier to bury than to save." 2 days after the empty lab, I sat in a glass conference room at the top of Takamori Tower and slid a folder across the table. My findings, clean, sourced, deliberately boring, because the truth reads best when it refuses to shout. "Everything is in there," I told Reika. "Contracts, guest book, equipment logs, the coordinator's letter. My part is done. You hand it to people whose actual job this is, and I go home to my small, quiet life." She did not open the folder. "You are trying to leave," she observed, as if noting the weather. "I am trying to be finished," I said. "There is a difference, but a small one, and I am standing right on top of it, hoping nobody notices." The plan was simple, and I liked it for being simple. I would exit, an auditor would take over, and I would go back to a life with no Takamori attached to my name. 7 years in that family, and 2 honest days had somehow been enough for me. The plan lasted only as long as it took for the door to open again without a knock. The woman who came in did not smile and looked at me like a line item she had not approved. Cropped hair, glasses shoved up into it, a coffee she had no intention of sharing with anyone alive. "Sayaka Fujimoto, independent audit," she said, dropping into a chair. "And you must be the friend, the one who found all this, who worked for the accused for free, and is now sitting in the CEO's private conference room. Do you see the problem, or shall I draw it in crayon?" "You think I am either a hero or a grudge," I said, "and nobody can audit a grudge." "I cannot audit anything you touched, which is the real problem," she shot back. "If a bitter ex-best friend built this file, every figure in it is poison, and a first-year lawyer buries it before lunch." Reika folded her hands and let a small silence pass, "Which is precisely why I called you, and not a friendlier firm who would tell me what I want." "Then here are the terms," Sayaka said, tapping the folder without opening it. "I resource all of it from nothing. Public filings, the grant office, the contractor registry, the bank records the foundation is required by law to keep." I asked her what happened if she decided I had invented the whole thing. "Then I find that instead, and I enjoy it more," she said, almost smiling. "Either way, you become irrelevant to the proof, and irrelevant is the kindest gift I can hand your credibility right now." I should have been offended, and instead I trusted her more with every sentence, because a person who wants to disprove you is worth 10 who only want to nod along and bill you. "Prove I am wrong," I told her. "It is the only road by which anyone will ever believe I am right." She was already typing. "Give me an hour with the registry, and I will tell you whether your Bright Path Contractors is a company or a costume with a bank account." It took her less than that. She turned the screen toward us with the grim pleasure of a woman who enjoys being correct far more than she enjoys being comfortable. "Bright Path has no employees and no office," she said. "A mailbox in a strip mall, one listed director, and an account that only receives money from the foundation and pays it out to 2 vendors, and only 2. I asked which 2. "A printing firm and a public relations shop called Meridian," she said, letting it settle. "So your empty center paid a fake contractor who paid a real PR agency to write glossy reports about how gloriously full the empty center was." "The money went in a circle," I said, feeling the floor tilt a little. "It went through a laundry, and it is tidy work," Sayaka answered, leaning back. "Too tidy. A frightened person hides cash in a shoebox. Somebody built this with a floor plan and a ruler." Reika's voice was very quiet. "You are telling me my daughter did not design this alone?" "I am telling you the architecture is patient and the panic is not," Sayaka said. "Someone taught her or built it around her. Frightened people improvise, and this did not improvise once. That should keep every one of you awake at night." Reika absorbed it without a flinch, but I saw what it cost her. If someone had built this around Yuna, then her daughter was not only a culprit in the thing, she was also, somewhere underneath, a mark. Find the architect, she told Sayaka. Not only the signature. I can live with a daughter who lied to me. I am less certain I can forgive the man who taught her how and then left her holding all of it. That was when the second problem arrived, wearing a headset and carrying a tablet like a shield against the entire building. Kaori set a single printed page in front of Reika, face down, the careful way you hand over something that might go off in a crowded room. A conflict of interest disclosure, she explained, in the flat voice she keeps for fires. Scope, fee, and end date. The paperwork answers an accusation before you ever have to open your own mouth to do it. Reika did not touch it. Accusation of what then? Of whatever they need to be true, Ms. Takamori, Kaori said without a blink. There is also a second page, a list of restaurants that do not leak to the press, sorted by neighborhood. Purely a coincidence that I compiled it this morning before dawn. Reika turned the page over very slowly and said her chief of staff's name like a warning. Kaori. I manage risk, Kaori replied unmoved. Some risks arrive as spreadsheets, others arrive in a rented tuxedo and rebuild a dead video in 40 minutes flat. I am labeling the category before it becomes an incident with your fingerprints on it. I have been embarrassed in many creative ways across my life, but this was a new one, being professionally filed as a hazard in front of the hazard's own subject. Sayaka laughed into her coffee and declared she liked her. She has already thought hard about the thing you two keep refusing to look at directly, Sayaka added, and the silence that followed answered on our behalf loudly. Because there was a thing, and I had felt it in a parking garage and again in an empty room, a pole with no permission stapled to it, toward the first person in years who watched what I did and called it worth something. And it could not happen, not while her name signed my checks, so I did what I always do with a want I cannot have. I went to complain about it to Haruto over 2 bad beers in his cramped office. He listened to the entire story, feet up on a crate of unused banners, and when I finished, he did not laugh, which was how I knew he had taken it seriously. So, the daughter treated you like furniture for 7 years, he said, and now the mother sees you clearly, and you drove across town to talk yourself out of the best thing I have ever watched land on you. It is more complicated than that, I muttered into the bottle. It is exactly that, with a lawyer stapled on top, he said, pointing the bottle at me. But hear me, Ren. I have watched you fix that family for free since we were kids, and I have opinions with muscle behind them now. I told him she was not asking me to fix anything. Then she is the first Takamori in recorded history who is not, he said, clinking his bottle to mine, which makes it either the best news of your life or a brand new trap in a nicer building. Go find out which, sober, ideally. The attack I had been warned about started that same week, and it was cleverer than I braced for, because Shun did not accuse me of anything at all. Accusations can be answered. He told a story instead, and he told it with sympathy, which is the cruelest way to lie about a man. Poor Reika, the story sighed. So much pressure lately, and that man, the one Yuna threw away, has fastened himself to her. Has he not? Such convenient timing, such convenient access. You do have to wonder what he is truly after here. By Friday, 2 members of the audit committee had asked, gently, whether the whole investigation might be tainted by the CEO's personal interest in her own consultant. One of them caught me by the elevators to say it to my face. Nothing personal, son, he told me, almost kindly. But if you are what they whisper you are, you will cost that woman her company. And if you are not, you can prove it by being gone before Monday. That night, Kaori called to tell me the same committee member had put it in writing. A polite memo recommending the CEO's consultant be barred from any further contact with the investigation. It was reasonable. It was also the one thing the fraud needed to survive. He was not wrong, and that was the whole poison of it. Shun had built an accusation out of a thing that had not even happened yet, and the only way to pull its teeth was to make certain it never could become true. Reika invited me to dinner that night, and we both pretended it was to review the handoff. A quiet place off Kaori's impossible list, low light, no cameras, a corner table she picked so she could watch the door out of 20 years of pure habit. For a while we talked about the case, because the case was safe ground. Then it ran dry, and we sat with the other thing. 2 careful people waiting out a storm neither wanted to name. You keep glancing at the exits, I said, and she admitted it was reflex. A whole life spent deciding who was allowed to want something from her. You are difficult, she went on, turning her glass without drinking from it. You found the one thing wrong in my company, and then you tried to hand it back and walk away. Nobody does that. Everybody wants the next thing. So what is it you want, Ren? She asked, and I understood she was not being rhetorical. She genuinely could not place me, and that unsettled her more than the fraud had. To not be a favor, I told her. I have been a free favor for 7 years. I would rather be nothing to you than be that again. She was quiet, and then she gave me the truest sentence anyone in that family had ever offered. You are already not nothing to me. That is the problem. I hired an auditor to survive. I went home and did not sleep, and in the morning I did the hardest easy thing of my entire life. I found her alone in her office, the city going gold behind the glass, and I laid a signed termination on her desk beside the untouched check. I am ending the contract tonight, I said, and returning the fee, all of it, down to the last coin. You are 3 weeks from being paid for work already finished, she pointed out. I know what the money is worth, and I know what it is worth to them, I said, staying on my feet. As long as you pay me, I am your instrument, and everything I say is a mother's puppet talking. The moment you stop, I am a citizen with an opinion and a clean pair of hands. She asked why that mattered so much to me. Because Sayaka needs it, and you need it, I said, and then made myself finish the sentence. And I need it, for a reason I will not say out loud while you are still my client. She did not move, and the pause went on long enough to hurt. Then she tore the check in half and again, and set the pieces beside the termination like she was closing a deal instead of ending one. There, you are unemployed. Congratulations to us both. Thank you, I said. It is easily the finest job I ever quit. The reason you would not say. Her voice stayed level, but her hands had gone still on the desk. There is no contract in this room now, Ren. Say it to me. So, I said it, and I kept my promise to myself and made it no speech. You are the first person in that whole family who treated what I do like it belonged to me. I do not want to walk out of this building and go back to being invisible. Not to you. She came around the desk and stopped an arm's length away, close enough that the distance became a decision instead of an accident. I have been careful for 20 years, and I am tired of careful, she said. But hear my terms first. She counted them off without softening one. She would not hide this. She would not use it against her daughter, and she would not let a living soul say she had bought me, in the light, as equals, or not at all. Those are hard terms, I said, and she agreed that they were the only ones she owned, and told me to choose. I have spent my whole life on other people's terms, I answered. Yours are the first that sound like mine. There was no grand kiss with the city on fire behind us. There was something quieter and far better. She took my hand on purpose, the first thing offered to me in 7 years instead of demanded of me. And for once I was not fixing a single thing. I was only being chosen. We did not pretend the hard part was behind us. Over coffee, we both drank standing up, because sitting felt like tempting fate. We drew the map of how this would work in daylight. No secret cars, no back entrances. If a reporter asked, we would answer plainly, and she would recuse herself from anything touching Yuna or the Foundation, which meant the woman who ran everything now had to watch the most important fight of her life from the cheap seats. Kaori received the news as she receives all news, by opening a fresh document. I will need a public timeline, she said, and a very short list of people permitted to use the word girlfriend. It currently holds 2 names, and one of them is a lawyer. It felt like the end of a story, and it was the pin sliding out of a much larger one. Because a woman keeping a thing clean and a woman keeping a thing secret are 2 different promises, and Reika had made only the first. Across the city the next morning, Yuna found out how the worst news always arrives, not from her mother, from a photograph a colleague forwarded, meaning to be kind, or meaning something colder underneath the kindness. Her mother, and beside her, close in a way that was not the close of business, stood the man Yuna had named her free personal assistant 2 nights before a room full of investors and cameras. She did not shout, which frightened the people near her more than shouting would have. For a strange second, she remembered being 19, sick with fever, and Ren showing up at her dorm with soup he could not afford, and it made the phone shake in her hand. Then the memory closed like a door, because sentiment was a luxury and she had a throne to lose. She set the phone down with terrible care. He is not helping her, she told the empty office. He is taking her, piece by piece. And in the private arithmetic of a woman who had never once shared a thing she owned, the sum finished itself without her permission, her mother, her company, her name, her whole future as the next Takamori, walking out the one door she could never lock. In Takamori Tower, a phone rang on Shun Kuroda's desk. He listened to Yuna's small, careful, terrible calm, and he smiled, because a frightened partner is a useful partner, and someone had handed him a weapon he did not even have to build himself. Then we let the whole world read what he truly is, Shun said gently into the phone. A man who could not have you, so he took your mother instead. It writes itself, my love. All we do is help the good people turn the pages in the right order. He hung up and allowed himself one thought he would never say to Yuna. If this ever came apart, the world would need someone to blame, and grief made a daughter far more sympathetic than a strategist could ever be. He filed the thought away, gently. For a later, he was already planning. The story broke on a Tuesday. On a business gossip site nobody admits to reading, and everybody reads. The headline did its whole job in 8 words. The lonely CEO and the assistant who traded up. I read it standing in my kitchen, coffee going cold, and the craft was good. It never lied outright. It only arranged true things into a false shape and let the reader do the ugly part for themselves. Discarded by the daughter, it purred. Then, so conveniently, comforting the mother. A man with no title, no money, and no visible ambition beyond nearness to the most powerful woman in the city. There was a photo of me in the rented tuxedo from the party, which meant somebody had been building this file since the night I walked out. This was not a reaction to my relationship. It was a plan that had been sitting in a drawer, waiting for a reason. By noon, the story had jumped from the gossip site into the group chats, and from the group chats into the bloodstream of Takamori Tower, where it counted. People who had never met me suddenly knew precisely who I was. Investors sent Reika careful notes asking whether everything was all right at the top. The board scheduled an unscheduled call, and the audit committee, already nervous, now had a headline to wave whenever they wanted to slow Sayaka down. That was the real target, of course. Not me. The investigation. If the man who found the empty center was a gold digger, then the empty center was only a lover's excuse, and everyone could go back to the comfort of not looking. Kaori called me before I had finished my second coffee, already 3 moves ahead of my panic. Do not resign from her life to protect her. That is what the story is begging you to do. A noble exit reads as a guilty one. So I just stand here and take it. You stand there and let the professionals absorb it, she corrected. We wait, we document, and we let them overreach. People who write in a brand voice always overreach. It is the only move they own. A pause. Also, burn the rented tuxedo. It photographs like a confession. Haruto came over that night with takeout and read the article aloud in the voice of a man reading a ransom note. Then he started annotating it, and that is when the comedy sharpened into a clue. Listen to this, he said, mouth full. A source close to the family describes Mr. Aizawa as opportunistic and rootless. Rootless. Who says rootless? Nobody living says rootless. I asked him what he was getting at, and he lit up like I had handed him a microphone. A human being would call you a leech, Ren. A PR shop calls you rootless, because rootless polls better and cannot be sued. He tapped the screen hard. This is written in the exact fake grown-up language as those fraud reports. Empowering, synergized, rootless. The same pen wrote the lie about the center and the lie about you. I stopped chewing because he was right. The smear against me and the fiction about the center carried the same fingerprints, and both pairs of hands wore Meridian on the cuff. I called Sayaka, who had already seen it and had landed somewhere between furious and delighted. Do not touch it, she said before I got a word out. Do not write a rebuttal. Do not call a reporter. Do not argue in a comment section like a man who has never met the internet. They are calling me a parasite to 100,000 strangers, Sayaka. Yes, and if you flail, you hand them footage of the parasite flailing. Her voice went crisp. But this is a gift. Meridian wrote it, and Meridian sits on the fraud's payroll. Every time they swing at you, they draw a brighter line between the smear and the money. She sent me one file before hanging up, an invoice pulled straight from the public grant records. Meridian had billed the Foundation for Reputation Management the same week the article ran, filed under a line called Stakeholder Narrative Alignment. They invoiced the company to smear the company's own whistleblower, she said, and were arrogant enough to log it. I did not steal anything. They mailed me the rope and asked me to sign for it. Everything in me still wanted to fight it directly. That is the thing you should know about me, the flaw I had not yet paid full price for. When something is broken, my hands move before my brain votes, and I try to fix it alone and fast before anyone gets hurt. I drafted a statement at 2 in the morning, a good one, calm and devastating. Then I stared at it for a long while and deleted it because Sayaka was right, and I was tired of being the smartest man at the bottom of a hole I dug. Reika had a plan of her own, and hers did not involve hiding. There is a foundation reception on Thursday, she told me on the phone, in the flat, certain voice she uses when a decision is already carrying weight. Donors, press, the board, I want you there, as my guest. That is walking into a fire wearing gasoline, I said. She answered that it was walking into her own house and refusing to use the servant's door. They had written a story about a man who sneaks, so we would not sneak. Wear the good suit, she added, not the rented one. The reception filled the atrium of Takamori Tower, all glass and soft money, the kind of room where reputations are traded like coats at the door. I walked in beside Reika and felt every head do the arithmetic the article had taught them. For a while it was survivable. Then I saw Yuna, and the survivable part of the evening ended. She was radiant, playing the role the story had written for her without a single wasted gesture. The wounded daughter. She moved through the donors collecting sympathy like appetizers, and every soft look she gathered was a small deposit in the account of my ruin. She found me by the windows, away from her mother. We had not stood this close since the party. Up close, under the charm, she looked exhausted, and I hated that I noticed. You look good in a suit that fits, she said sweetly. Did she buy it for you? Or did you put it on her card yourself? Hello, Yuna, I said, which only seemed to sharpen her further. 7 years. Her smile held while her eyes moved. 7 years I kept you around, and the second I stopped needing you, you climbed straight up the family tree to the top branch. You could not stand being nobody, so you found the biggest somebody in the building and latched on. You did not keep me around, I said evenly. You used me and called it friendship, and I let you, and that was my fault, not yours. But I am not your fixer anymore, and I am not your enemy, and I am certainly not the villain in your press release. You are sleeping with my mother. Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, and for a second the frightened girl showed through the polish. Do you have any idea what that does to me, in front of everyone I know? I know what it takes from you, I said. The one person you were sure would always come when you snapped. And I am sorry it hurts. I am not sorry I stopped coming. For one breath, her face did something honest. You used to know me, she said, almost soft. Before her, before all of this. You were the only one who ever really knew me, Ren. And now you look at me like a file. I still know you, I said. That is why I am not fighting you. I am trying to reach whoever is standing behind you before they decide you are the one left to take the fall alone. Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, buried fast. Nobody is standing behind me, she said. I do not need anyone behind me. I never have. And she believed it, which was the saddest thing said all night. She opened her mouth to cut deeper, but before the blade landed, a spoon rang against a glass across the room, and Reika Takamori stepped up to the microphone, and the whole atrium turned. Thank you all for coming, Reika said, and let the room settle before she detonated it, gently. I understand there has been some creative writing about my personal life this week. Since I dislike fiction that dresses up as journalism, I will spare you the guessing. You could hear the ice settling in the champagne buckets, and for a long beat, the room forgot to breathe. Yes, I am seeing Ren Aizawa. He is the consultant who found a serious problem inside our foundation. She paused, unhurried. He then resigned his contract and returned his fee, because he would not let a paycheck make his findings look bought. I began seeing him only after that. In that order, on purpose. She scanned the room, calm as a closing door. You are welcome to believe a gossip site that has never met either of us, or you can believe your own eyes over the coming months as an independent audit runs its course without my interference, since I have recused myself entirely. One of those choices is lazy, she finished. I have never once rewarded lazy. It was the most elegant thing I have ever watched a person do with a microphone. She had not attacked Yuna. She had not begged. She had simply stood in the light the story swore she was cowering from, and the story died a little in every hand holding a phone. For one shining moment, I let myself believe we had won the night. I should have known better, because Shun had not come to win a night. He had come to win the war, and he did it while the room was still applauding Reika's poise. He appeared at my elbow with 2 board members and a folder, smiling like a man delivering flowers. Ren, a word. It is a compliment truly. You have become important enough to require paperwork. The folder held a formal resolution wrapped in the softest possible language. To protect the integrity of the independent investigation from any appearance of personal influence, Mr. Ren Aizawa, private individual, was barred from Takamori Group premises, personnel, and records, effective immediately. You see the beauty of it, Shun murmured. Only for me. Your own girlfriend cannot object, because objecting proves she is shielding you. The auditor cannot object, because she wanted you at a distance to begin with. It is reasonable, and everyone reasonable will agree. I looked at Reika across the room, watched her read the resolution in Kaori's hands, and watched her understand she could not tear this one in half. If she fought it, she proved every word of the gossip. Her hands were tied by the very honesty that made her worth loving. You planned this before she even spoke, I said. Shun's smile did not waver. I planned this the night you walked out of a ballroom. Everything since has only been you arriving on schedule. Security will show you out. Enjoy the rest of the evening from the sidewalk. They walked me out through the front doors, not the servants' entrance, which I suppose was Reika's small, stubborn victory, even inside a defeat. The cold hit me on the steps, and behind the glass the party glittered on without me in it. Reika reached me by phone before I made the corner, her voice tight with a fury she was not allowed to spend. I cannot undo it, not without proving I am compromised, which finishes the audit and my daughter in one stroke. I know, I said. Do not undo it. It is a good trap. We only have to be better than a good trap. You are on the outside now, Ren. No access, no files, nothing at all. I have never had access, I said, and I nearly laughed. I spent 7 years fixing that family with a phone and a good memory. Outside is the only place I have ever done real work. But we both heard the truth under the brave words. Shun had done the one thing that stung. He had put the walls of an entire company between me and the proof, and sealed the proof inside with the people who built it. So that night, on a cold sidewalk, we made a different plan through a phone we both knew might be the only meeting we got for a while. If the evidence was locked inside the tower, I would build the case from the one place Shun could not wall off. The fraud did not only cost money, I said, it cost people. Real kids who were promised real programs and handed a photo op instead. Those people are not inside your building. They are out here, with me. There was a name in the file, Reika said slowly. The coordinator who resigned rather than lie. Miki Nagase, I said. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it is the woman who refused to help bury them. I will find her. Be careful with her. There was something in Reika's voice, almost like a warning I did not yet understand. A witness is a person first, Ren, and evidence a long way second. Never once forget which of those comes before the other. I told myself I heard her, but hearing a warning and understanding it are two different acts, and the distance between them nearly cost me everything I had left. Haruto, when I told him, cracked his knuckles like a man who had waited his whole life to be useful in the correct direction. Good. Inside their walls, you are a scandal. Out here, you are an event organizer with a cause and a friend who owns a folding chair company. Let them keep the tower. We take the street. Inside, meanwhile, Yuna watched the guards close the doors on me, and the thing in her chest that should have felt like triumph felt instead like the top of a staircase with no railing. She had wanted me gone. I was gone. So why did the room feel emptier instead of fuller? And why did winning feel so much like the half second before you fall? Shun found her by the windows and pressed a fresh glass into her hand. You see? Handled. He is on the sidewalk, and you are the daughter everyone pities and no one suspects. We are going to be perfectly fine. We are going to be fine, she repeated, and did not believe it and drank anyway. Then Yuna reached for the only thing that ever quiets a feeling too large to hold. She reached for control. If I wanted to prove I was so essential, so tragically irreplaceable, she would show the whole watching world how replaceable I truly was. I need a new coordinator, she told Shun, her smile clicking back into place like a set bone. Sharp, loyal, someone who can run the youth showcase next month and make it flawless. I want everyone to see that the great Ren Aizawa was never anything I could not simply hire off a shelf. Shun's smile widened because a replacement was not only useful theater, it was another set of hands to route money through, another signature to spend that was not his own. I know just the man. Ambitious, hungry, easy to steer. He will make you shine. That is all I ever wanted, Yuna said. And for a moment, she sounded 19 again and tired. And I think if I had been in the room to hear it, I might have grieved for her instead of bracing against her. Across town, on that cold sidewalk, I did not know any of it yet. I only knew the walls were up, the proof was locked inside, and the woman I loved was trapped in a house built out of her own honesty. And high above me, a light still burned in the tower, where my former best friend had just decided to prove she never needed me by hiring the one man who would end up proving, in front of everyone, that she always had. My replacement had a headshot, a new title, and a font. Haruto slid the proof across my kitchen table, 3 weeks after security walked me down the front steps of Takamori Tower. It was the production binder for the Foundation's youth showcase. His events company had won the staging contract through the venue itself, chairs and rigging and power, hired by the hall. Nobody at Takamori had read the vendor list closely enough to notice whose best friend owned the chairs. Legally, I am furniture, Haruto said, tapping the cover. Emotionally, I am a one-man intelligence agency. Page 1. Tell me what you see. Page 1 was the run of show. Daiichi Mori, program excellence lead, sat in the header in a confident font. Under his name stretched a schedule so smooth it could only have been written by a man who had never run an event containing one live child. I read it twice, and my stomach did the thing it does when a bridge looks beautiful and nobody remembered the bolts. There is no transport line, I said. 40 demo kids from 3 schools and nobody owns the buses. No arrival window, no chaperone count, no permission slips on file. He has the children listed like folding chairs. Haruto nodded along like a doctor hearing his own diagnosis read back to him. Keep going. It gets richer, all the way to the last page. The minor's stage permit is missing, and City Hall wants 2 weeks for those. The caterer is the same one that nearly quit Yuna's party, still owed money. And the demo tables have no power runs. 16 robots, not one chord on the plot. You rebuilt that checklist in your head in under a minute, Haruto said. The man being paid an executive salary to own it believes a permit is a mood. 7 years of invisible labor leaves you with one strange gift. You know how a thing collapses, in what order, and which piece screams first. Not my circus, I said, and closed the binder, and both of my hands hated me for it. You are allowed to enjoy this, Haruto said, watching my face. She branded you her free assistant, fired you from her whole life, and replaced you with a man who cannot count children. This is dessert on a warm plate. There are real kids under that schedule. When it goes down, it lands on them first, I said. That is the part that whole company has never once understood. Haruto stopped smiling because he puts teenagers on his own cruise every summer. Then I will do my job very well, he said, and I will keep my phone very charged. Across the city, in a corner office with a fresh nameplate, Yuna was busy falling for her own idea of Daiichi Mori. He said end-to-end ownership and zero defect delivery, wrote flawless on a legal pad, underlined it twice, and after a month of carrying the whole thing alone, she felt managed. What Shun liked about him would have fit on a business card. Hungry, vain, and quick to sign. The board reads this event as a signal, Shun told him. Pleasant as a loan officer. The vice president delivers a public program at scale, weeks after some unpleasant press. Deliver it cleanly and everyone rises together. Daiichi had one question. My predecessor's handover files, where do I find them? There is no predecessor, Yuna said, with a smile that never reached her eyes. The role is new. You are building from zero. That is the excitement of it. So, a man carried out a job that had been done for 7 years by somebody whose name he would never be told. Certain he was the first ever to hold it. The showcase took the grand hall of a convention center on a Saturday. Banners 2 stories tall read Future Builders Showcase, a stage, a demo floor, 400 seats, a press riser, and a roped front row for the board of Takamori Group. Reika arrived with Kaori and sat where recused people sit, 1 seat off-center, close enough to be seen supporting youth and far enough to touch nothing. She had not been permitted a single question about the program in weeks, and the stillness of her hands said what she thought of that. I spent the morning across the street in Haruto's load-in van, under a strict treaty with myself. I was a friend, in a parked vehicle on a public street. The building was none of my business. The treaty held for roughly 40 minutes. Bus 1 is empty, Haruto reported by phone from somewhere echoing. Not late, Ren. Empty. Nobody reconfirmed the schools after the invites went out. 12 kids showed out of 40. Everyone dropped off by a parent. Mori is calling it a rounding issue. I asked where he was putting the 12. Front tables, camera side, so the reel reads full, Haruto said, and I could hear my friend aging over the line. He ordered the empty stations struck. My guys are carrying out 16 work tables with the kids' name cards still taped to them. Every one of those cards was a child who had rehearsed something at home in front of a mirror. I stared at the van ceiling and reminded myself out loud that furniture's friend does not sprint across streets. By 11, the fire marshal had found there was no miner's permit on file. The caterer arrived with half an order and last month's unpaid invoice stapled to the delivery sheet. The soundboard browned out twice because the demo power and the stage power shared one sad circuit. Each of those was a thing I used to catch a week early, without noise, for free. It felt less like pride and more like grief. Spend years as a building skeleton and step outside it once, and all you can see is where the bones are missing. Inside, Daiichi Mori made the decision that told me where he had learned this trade. Live demos were now risky, understaffed, underpowered. Video was safe, so he cut the children and extended the film. The segment where 12 real kids would show real machines shrank to 6 minutes. The glossy reel about the Foundation's thriving programs grew to 20. He is choosing the reel over the kids, Haruto said flatly. It is the Aoba Center again, with catering. This company has one single move. The boy with the shoebox reached the front doors a little after noon, and I watched the whole thing happen from across the street. He was maybe 15, in a blazer bought a size early, carrying the box with both hands the way you carry something alive. He gave his name at check-in. A staffer scrolled again, and shook her head. At capacity, she said. Invitation only, she said to a boy holding an invitation. He did not argue. He stepped out of the line and stood to one side, recalculating his afternoon, and the box never tipped an inch. That detail is what pulled me out of the van. A kid guards a box like that when the thing inside is his best idea of himself. The sidewalk in front of a convention center belongs to the city. I checked that fact twice while I crossed, which tells you what a board resolution does to a grown man's walking. They lose your registration? I asked him. There was a mentorship slot. He opened the lid a crack, like a man showing papers at a border. Inside sat a robot the size of a bread loaf, wired clean, soldered by hand. The invite said, "Bring a project. 5 minutes with a real engineer if yours got picked." I asked what it did. Sorts used batteries by charge. My building throws out a couple hundred a month and half are still good. He shrugged with one shoulder, embarrassed by his own competence. And I knew that gesture from every mirror I have ever stood in front of. His name was Sora Kimura. He trained Saturdays at a small program across town called Hikari, folding tables in a borrowed basement, and his coach there had told her kids to skip this showcase entirely. Ms. Nagase says showcases eat kids, Sora reported. They borrow you for the photo and forget your name by Monday. I came anyway. The invite had the word slot in it. Slots sound real. Miki Nagase, the name from the bottom of a resignation letter. The one coordinator who had refused to sell a fake future. Now she coached actual kids in a basement while the empire that squeezed her out rented a hall to celebrate programs it never ran. I kept my face neutral and it cost me something. I asked if she had been wrong, his coach. No, that is the annoying part. She is never wrong, Sora said, eyes on the doors. I wanted the 5 minutes anyway. I could not give him the 5 minutes, and I could not walk him inside, and both facts had my old life's fingerprints on them. So I offered the one real thing I owned. Saturday mornings, there is a warehouse on Konda Street. My friend runs staging for real events. Bring the box. Nobody there will lie to you about what it is. He studied me with the flat, patient suspicion smart kids reserve for adults who promise things, and asked if it was a program. No. It is a warehouse with tools in it and men who will tell you the truth about your soldering, I said. Okay, Sora answered and closed the lid, and the small click of that hinge was the quietest verdict I have ever heard a company receive. Backstage, a few minutes past 1, the show arrived at the moment where it needed its skeleton. The reel had run twice, and the room had noticed. A director's wife asked in a voice that carried 3 rows where all the children from the video were sitting. The live segment was next, 12 kids on a floor dressed for 40, and the sound system browned out again during the walk-up. Yuna stood in the wings with a dying handheld mic and a pitch of panic nobody else could hear. Every crisis of her adult life had ended one way, with a text that said 2 minutes and a man arriving to make the floor solid under her feet. She took out her phone. Her thumb found the R names by itself. 7 years of muscle memory live in a thumb. Across the street in a parked van, my phone lit up with her name. It had not done that since the night I walked out of her party. It rang once, then nothing. I sat there holding the dark phone, coffee going cold in my other hand, and I could not have told you which outcome I had been hoping for. Backstage, Yuna put the phone away, as if it had burned her palm. She said one sentence to the mirror over the prep table, under her breath, to nobody at all. He would have this fixed in 10 minutes. Then she rolled her shoulders back, took the dying mic, and walked out to do the one thing she genuinely does better than anyone I have ever met. She was magnificent. I mean that with my whole bitter heart. She held 400 people with 12 children and a failing sound system. She narrated the demos herself when the mics dipped. She learned each kid's name in the wings and used everyone correctly under the lights. For most of that room, it landed as a charming save by a born leader. For the 6 people whose opinion was the entire purpose of the event, it landed differently. Board members count. Counting is their one job. They had been promised 40 builders at scale, and they had personally counted 12. Reika watched her daughter rescue a sinking event on pure nerve, and her recused hands stayed folded in her lap the entire time. Beside her, Kaori wrote one line on her tablet and tilted it sideways for the CEO alone. It read, "She is better than the thing she is protecting." The showcase closed at 4 with warm applause and a cold front row. By Monday morning, the paper had started moving, because paper is how frightened people in that company pray. Daiichi filed his impact report on Wednesday. It claimed the showcase engaged 240 youth participants through guided mentor sessions. Attached was an emergency staffing invoice from a vendor called Corpath Solutions for youth logistics support, sizable and suspiciously round. Sayaka Fujimoto reads foundation filings the way other people read gossip columns, and she called me Thursday in the tone of a woman unwrapping a gift. "Your replacement is a poet," she said. 240 participants. The venue's own security log says 26 minors, 12 of them demo kids. I said counts get sloppy because somebody in our arrangement has to play defense. Counts get sloppy. Invoices confess, she shot back. Corpath Solutions was registered 11 days before the showcase in a mailbox 2 floors above Meridian's satellite office. And the emergency invoice is dated the day before the emergency happened. He bought his rescue in advance, she went on. As an auditor, I admire the confidence. As a person, I want him in a small, bright room with a lawyer and a glass of water. I said his first month was a fresh shell company, an invented headcount, and a backdated invoice. His first month is everything I need. Plus one thing I did not expect, Sayaka said. His own signature on every page. Yuna has quietly stopped signing things. The new boy signs like he is feeding ducks. He has no idea what he joined, I said, and heard how little joy I had about being right. They will feed him to whichever arrives first, my audit or the board, which turns him into the most cooperative witness either of us will ever meet. My job is the audit. His lawyer can handle the warnings, a pause and the click of a pen. If you know anybody who prays, the name is Mori. First initial D. Then the line went dead. And I never did work out whether that had been a joke. In the strategy office that same afternoon, Shun Kuroda read Daiichi's impact report twice, cover to cover, and then did the most dangerous thing available to him, nothing. A cruder man would have killed the new fraud on sight. Shun understood that a signed lie is an asset. Every reckless page Daiichi filed stood as one more wall between the paper trail and himself, one more door he could open later in front of the right audience at the hour of his choosing. He saved a copy to a private folder and typed a note beneath Daiichi's name in his tidy personal system, useful until spring. The board of Takamori Group met that Friday. Ran 2 hours over, and not one person leaked a word, which is how the whole tower knew it had been serious. They had watched a showcase advertise a scale it could not produce. 2 directors had grandchildren on foundation waiting lists that the foundation kept celebrating in print. And a board, whatever else it is a body with one reflex. When it stops trusting the reports, it orders a demonstration. The notice went out Friday evening on governance letterhead, a live program review of the foundation's leadership, on-site, independent verification, no pre-produced media permitted, 3 weeks out. Reika brought it to dinner at my apartment that night because a barred man and a recused woman are left with one safe arena in this city, and it is a kitchen. Read the third line twice, she said, handing it over. No reels. No rehearsed presentations. Yuna will stand inside a real program that has to exist in physical space, in front of professionals whose only job is verifying things. I asked if anyone could build something real in 3 weeks. No. She said it very softly, and the mother and the executive answered in the same breath, which I had never once heard happen before. Real takes a year. She will need a miracle, or a magician. We both knew the magician's name. Neither of us said it over food. She will not call you, Reika said, reading me over the rim of her glass, a thing she does that I have stopped pretending to resent. Pride is the one asset my daughter has never leveraged. She hoards it. I know. That is the part that scares me, I said. A person down to one asset will sell everything else first. Reika did not argue because she had raised the person in question and knew the inventory better than I did. Across the city that same hour, Yuna read the board's notice until the words stopped behaving like words. Live, on-site, independent, verified. Each term was a door closing somewhere down a hallway she could not see the end of. Shun stood behind her chair, and if the notice had frightened him, he had finished being frightened long before he entered the room. Breathe, he said, warm as a heat lamp. A live test is still a show. It has a stage, an audience, and a running order. They bring their own experts. They interview the kids. They verify, Yuna said. You cannot feed me answers in front of... She stopped, hearing herself, a woman taking the measure of the machine she was strapped inside. You cannot, she repeated, slower. I can, Shun said gently, and turned her chair around to face him. Wear your hair down on the left that day, and trust me. Nobody is going to let you fall, Yuna. Not while I am standing in the building. She chose to hear that as love. Most nights, she still could. 3 weeks. One live test built to be impossible to fake, and a man already sketching how to fake it. And between them, my former best friend, hair down on the left, walking a wire she had asked for. All I could do from the sidewalk was watch the count. The board designed the test like a trap built for something clever. I heard the shape of it from Sayaka, who heard it from the audit committee, who could not keep a secret if their pensions depended on it. No slides, no reels, no rehearsed walkthrough. Yuna would stand before the board and a handful of invited investors and answer live questions about the foundation's programs. Real numbers on a shared screen, pulled that morning. And at a time, nobody would be told in advance, a surprise site check. The board would pick a center at random and drive to it, unannounced, while Yuna was still answering questions across town. They built the whole thing around one fear, Sayaka told me over the phone, and I could hear her almost respecting it, that the reports are theater, so they removed the theater. You cannot fake a building a stranger picks at random, she went on, while you are standing in a different building answering questions you have not seen. I said, unless someone feeds you the answers in real time. Unless that, she agreed, and the line went quiet while we both looked at the same man from opposite sides of the city. 2 weeks out, Yuna did something that surprised me when Sora told me about it. She went looking for real teenagers. If the board wanted proof of impact, she would bring living proof and sit them in the front row. She could not use Aoba kids because there were none. She could not use the 12 from the showcase because they had parents who now ask questions. So her new man, Daichi, made calls, and one of those calls landed at the Hikari basement, where Miki Nagase coached actual children for actual free. They offered us a field trip, Sora reported at the Kanda warehouse that Saturday, elbow deep in his battery robot. Nice lunch, a look at the tower, and we sit up front while some lady talks about how great her programs are. Miss Nagase said no so fast it made a wind. I asked why she said no. She said they collect kids like stamps to prove they went places. He tightened a wire. But 3 guys are going anyway. Free lunch is free lunch, and the tower has an aquarium in the lobby. I filed that carefully and said nothing, because Miki Nagase had just refused to sell her kids for the 2nd time, and the woman kept getting more interesting the longer I did not meet her. The test ran on a Thursday, in the largest boardroom in Takamori Tower, glass on 3 sides and the city laid out below like a spreadsheet. Reika sat at the far end, present as CEO, but recused from every word, a private torture for a woman who built the table. I was not there. I was barred, remember? I got the whole thing in pieces afterward, from Kaori's dry account, from Sayaka's furious one, and from a boy who noticed more than any adult in the room. It went well for Yuna at first because talking is her cathedral. She spoke about mentorship and momentum, warm and specific and quick. When a director asked about retention, she had a number. When an investor asked about outcomes, she had a story. Shun sat 2 seats down, calm, a tablet face down in front of him. He said almost nothing, which in a man who talks for a living is the loudest thing he can do. He was not there to speak. He was there to listen for the sound of ice cracking. Then the honest teenagers went off script, which is the only thing honest people reliably do. An investor leaned toward the 3 Hikari boys in the front row and asked them kindly what their favorite part of the foundation's program had been. A softball. It hit the floor and rolled somewhere nobody expected. "We are not in the foundation's program," the tallest one said, polite and confused. "We are with Hikari. Ms. Nagase runs it. We came for the lunch, which was really good, thank you." You could have heard a pin drop, except a pin would have been too loud. The investor, still smiling, asked whether Hikari was part of the foundation. The boy thought about it honestly. "I do not think so. We meet in a church basement, and the heater is broken," he said. "We asked the foundation for chairs once, and nobody wrote back." Kaori later described the next 4 seconds as the most expensive silence she had ever billed. Yuna's smile did not move, which is how you know a person's whole body has just turned to ice underneath it. And under the glass table, out of sight, Shun turned his tablet over. He did it so smoothly that no one but the 2 Hikari boys, and later, Kaori registered it as a motion at all. He typed, and Yuna's phone, in her lap, lit once against the underside of the glass, and she glanced down the way you glance at nothing. "The boys are right, and I am proud that they are," Yuna said, without a stumble, without a seam. "Hikari is one of 11 grassroots partners the foundation funds at arm's length, so we never crowd out the local leaders who make them work. Ms. Nagase is a treasure," she went on, gathering speed. "The broken heater is on me. It should have been fixed. It will be by Monday." It was a beautiful lie, whole and warm and instant, and it landed. Investors nodded. A director wrote treasure on a pad. And a boy in the front row who knew for a fact that no foundation money had ever reached his basement went quiet because he was 15 and outnumbered, and the lunch really had been good. The answer had come from Shun's tablet. I would learn the exact words weeks later, but everyone in that room saw only Yuna, radiant and improvising, saving a stumble with grace. That is the thing about a good handler. He builds a stage where his own work looks like your talent. Then came the part no tablet could type its way out of, the surprise site check. The lead director stood, checked his watch with theater, and announced that the board would now visit a center of its choosing, unannounced right now. He named it, not Ioba, which everyone half expected. He named the satellite office listed as a program annex on the newest filings. The address, though he did not know it, sitting 2 floors below a shell company called Corpath. I have to hand it to whichever board member picked that spot. He had aimed at random and hit the artery. Yuna went white in a way that even she could not narrate over. Daichi, the new man, made a small noise like a kettle deciding whether to scream, and Shun stood up, unhurried, and did the thing that would put Yuna in his pocket for the rest of the story. An excellent idea. "I will ride over with the delegation and open it myself," he said, buttoning his jacket. Yuna should stay and finish the board's questions. It would look strange for the vice president to chase a van across town like a woman with something to hide. He volunteered to walk the board straight into the room most likely to end them, and he did it as a favor. That is the trap of a gesture like that. Saying no would have been the confession, so nobody could say no. What happened at the satellite office, I reconstructed from Sayaka, who reached the same records the next morning and read them like a crime scene. The board arrived to find a working office, desks, staff, a wall of youth photos, a schedule with real smudges on it, a coordinator who answered every question they thought to ask. None of it had existed a week earlier. Shun had spent the days since the board's notice building one real room. He had hired temporary staff on short contracts, printed genuine-looking materials, rented furniture, and populated the annex with paid adults who knew just enough to nod. He had turned a shell into a diorama with a pulse. A magician does the same trick when he saws a real woman inside a real box. He could not fake the numbers anymore, so he faked the building, Sayaka told me, and for once there was no admiration in it, only cold. It cost a fortune and it will not survive a second look, but it survived that afternoon, which was the only afternoon that counted. The board toured a room that felt alive because it had been alive for 6 days, asked their questions, received calm answers, and left satisfied. The trap built to catch fakery had been beaten by a bigger, faster, more expensive fake, sprung the instant the true one was in danger. Yuna passed. The board recorded the foundation's programs as verified, its vice president as tested and cleared, and its succession track as formally hers to lose, which no minute of that day day had earned her. She had wanted to prove she never needed Ren. Instead, she had proven, in front of the only people who mattered, that she now needed Shun for the very air she breathed. She had traded one dependence for a far more dangerous one, and she had signed nothing, because he had made sure of that too. The one thing Shun could not do was make the fake building disappear as cleanly as he had raised it. And that is where Kaori Shibata comes in, because a diorama built in 6 days leaves receipts, and receipts are Kaori's mother tongue. She called me 2 days later, ostensibly about a scheduling conflict that did not exist, and spent 90 seconds on it before she got to the point in her flat, itemized voice. I processed a facilities anomaly this morning, purely administrative. I mention it only because you enjoy trivia. The annex the board toured, she went on, was furnished through a same-day rental account, catered by a staffing agency, and cleaned by a crew booked for a single afternoon. Someone spent the budget of a wedding to host a board for 40 minutes. The invoices routed through a temp's card, and that temp's contract ended at 5 o'clock the same day. The room died the moment the elevator doors closed. I asked why she was telling me, a barred private citizen with no standing. Because I am the chief of staff, and I file things, Kaori said. I filed this where the independent auditor will trip over it during a routine review. I did not send it to her. I merely failed, professionally, to hide it well. There is a difference, and it will matter to a lawyer someday. It was the driest act of sabotage I have ever heard described, and it was perfect. Shun's expensive rescue had not buried the fraud. It had printed a fresh, dated, receipted copy of the whole thing and dropped that copy directly into the path of the one person cleared to read it. Sayaka would find the 6-day building by its own catering bill. And this was the first paper that pointed at Shun instead of Yuna. Every earlier document wore her signature. Nobody signs a furniture rental with a strategy. This one had been ordered by a man who thinks receipts are beneath him, and men like that leave receipts in every room they enter. Everything in me wanted to take that catering bill to the board myself, that same night, and end it. I even opened a blank email to the lead director before I stopped. I had no standing, no access, and a barred man forwarding secret receipts would only prove I was the schemer the gossip site had drawn. So I called Sayaka instead of hitting send. Let the audit own it, she said, reading the silence off me like a printout. You find things. I prove them. The day you start proving them, you become the story again, and the story is a wall around the truth. I closed the email. It was the right call, and it still itched like a splinter I could not reach. Reika could not touch any of it. She had watched her daughter pass a rigged test inside her own building, forbidden from saying one word as the CEO, so she did the only thing still available to someone who had recused the executive, but could never recuse the mother. She invited Yuna to breakfast. Not a summons through Kaori, not a calendar hold. A handwritten note, the kind she had not sent since Yuna was small, slipped under the apartment door. Just us. No titles. Please. They met at a quiet place with good light and no cameras, and for a while they were only a mother and a daughter who did not know how to talk to each other anymore. You were impressive yesterday, Reika said. I am not allowed to have watched, so officially I did not. Unofficially, you held that room like a conductor. Yuna waited for the second half. She knew her mother's sentences like a staircase in the dark, and she had already counted the steps. But I have run this company for 20 years, Reika said, and I know the difference between a person answering a question and a person receiving one. She set down her cup. I watched you glance into your lap before the best answer of your life. I am your mother. I have watched you cheat at cards since you were 6, she added gently. I know your tell. Yuna's face did 3 things and settled on the coldest one. So now you are auditing me at breakfast. Did he put you up to this, your consultant? Leave Ren out of your mouth for one meal, Reika said, without heat, and it landed harder than shouting. This is not about him. This is the only thing I am still allowed to do, and I am doing it once, cleanly, so hear it. She leaned in, and the weather went out of her, and the CEO with it. What was left across the table was a frightened parent spending the last of something. I do not know how deep you are in. I have chosen not to know, which is its own cowardice, and I am done with it. So here is my one condition. Come to me first, she said, before it breaks. Whatever it is, however bad, whoever built it, Come to me before the world finds it, and I will stand between you and the worst of it as your mother, because that I am still permitted to do." "And if I do not?" Yuna asked, and the words came out in the voice of the girl who used to ask whether the storm would reach the house. "Then I will not lie for you," Reika said. "Not to the board, not to the law, not to myself. I love you enough to let it be fair. That is the whole condition. Come to me first, or face it alone." Yuna raised her eyes to her mother, and for one unbearable second, the girl who used to climb into that woman's bed during storms was right there at the table, trembling on the edge of saying everything. Then she thought of Shun and the 6-day building, and the answers that arrived in her lap like manna, and the fact that every thread she might pull ran straight through the man she was going to marry. To confess to her mother was to burn him, and she did not yet know she was the one being kept for the fire. "There is nothing to come to you about," Yuna said, and picked up her fork, and the door that had opened for 1 second swung shut. "But thank you for breakfast. The light is nice here." Reika nodded slowly and did not push, because you cannot force a person through a door they are holding closed with their whole body. She had made her offer, she would keep it. She went back to her tower to wait, a mother with a standing invitation, and no way to make her child walk through it. "I heard about the breakfast from Kaori," in 11 flat words at the end of a logistics call, she offered. Yuna declined. "The window is open, but small. I lay awake that night doing math I had no right to do, counting the exits closing around the woman who spent 7 years closing them on me. And I understood something that would matter later, when it was my own turn to be cornered." Yuna was not being defeated by an enemy. She was being slowly sealed inside a room by a man she had mistaken for a door. And the worst part, the part I could not say out loud to anyone, was that I had spent 7 years being that same kind of door. The only difference was that I never charged interest. Reika made her second offer 3 days after the first one failed. The first had been a door marked, "Confess." Her daughter had leaned her whole weight against it, so Reika built a different door. She did it at the apartment, over the same kind of breakfast, because a mother learns to keep returning to the last place her child felt safe. This time, she did not ask Yuna to admit anything. She asked her to build. 1 month, Reika said. One real project, a single youth program that actually exists, with real kids and real doors and not one word written by Meridian. "Do that," she went on, "and I will believe the rest was a young leader in over her head. We start clean from there." Yuna set down her cup with great care. "And this is you not interfering. This is me offering my daughter a way to become the person the reports pretend she already is," Reika said. "You are good with people, Yuna. I have watched you hold a room that was falling apart. That is not nothing," she added. "Spend it on something true once and see how it feels." It was the fairest thing anyone had offered Yuna in years, and I think some buried part of her knew it. She said she would think about it. From Yuna, who decided everything at a sprint, thinking about it was practically a yes. Shun heard about the condition within the hour because Yuna told him everything, which was the whole flaw in her. He did not frown. He congratulated her, kissed her forehead, and told her it was a wonderful idea worth doing carefully. Then he went to his own office, shut the door, and set about making careful impossible. I learned all of this later, because I was not supposed to be anywhere near it. But the case kept forcing Reika and me into the same rooms, and one of those rooms was where Yuna's hardening finished. It was an evening at Reika's, the two of us at her kitchen counter, arguing pleasantly about the one thing her daughter could not learn: help. "You want to send Hikari a truck of chairs and a new heater tomorrow," Reika said, catching my hand halfway to my phone. "I can see you drafting it. The heater is broken. Sora mentioned it. I happen to own a friend with a warehouse and a van." The message was already half-typed under my thumb. "It is one heater, Reika. Where is the harm in a heater?" "The harm is that you would decide what they need, deliver it, and feel warm about it," she said. "Ask Mickey what her program needs. Then let her say no to half of it. That is help. The rest of it feeds the part of you that has to be needed." It landed, because she had aimed it at the address where I actually live. For 7 years, I had called it kindness, this reflex to fix before anyone asked. She was the first person to name the hunger under it without any contempt in her voice. "You are describing me," I admitted. "The whole disease in one heater." "I am describing both of us," Reika said. "I solve things with a check or a phone call. You solve them by disappearing into the machinery until nobody can find the seam where you end, and their success begins." "It is the same sickness," she said. "Mine has a nicer office and a better view." We talked about the rule we had built to survive all this, the one that kept us alive so far. The romance in one room, the audit in another, the two never allowed to touch. Reika would not discuss the case with me, and I would not carry a word of it back to Sayaka. Clean hands, separate rooms. It is a good rule, I said. It is also the loneliest way to date someone, running everything past a mental lawyer first. Reika almost smiled. The day those rooms touch is the day they win the whole argument without making it. So we stay careful, we stay separate, and occasionally I steal your fruit. She took a piece of fruit off my plate as she said it. Easy and thoughtless, and that was the second the doorway behind us went cold. That is the scene Yuna walked in on. She had come to tell her mother she would take the month, the note still folded in her coat pocket. She stopped and saw us instead. Her mother laughing at something the man she once owned had said, the two of them easy in a kitchen. Everything she had lost, arranged in one frame, where she could not look away from it. She did not make a sound at first. She watched Reika steal the fruit off my plate, a small, stupid, intimate thing, and I felt the temperature of the room change before I even turned around. Yuna, Reika said, rising. I did not hear you come up. Clearly, Yuna answered, and the smile came back on like a light switch. Do not get up. I only came to say the answer is yes. Your month, your real project, she said, eyes on me the whole time. I will build you something so honest it squeaks. I would hate for anyone to think I need help. She was gone before Reika could answer, and the note stayed folded in her pocket. Whatever chance that month had of saving her got thinner in the doorway of that kitchen. She had said yes to the project and no to everything under it. In the same breath. Still, for about 10 days, she tried. I want that on the record because of what she becomes later. Yuna Takamori tried, and it nearly took. She almost turned around at the top of the Hikari basement stairs that first afternoon. The place smelled like instant coffee and wet coats. There was no reception desk, no branding, no light worth photographing, 20 folding chairs, and the sound of teenagers arguing about a circuit board that would not behave. Miki Nagase met her at the bottom step with her arms crossed. She was smaller than Yuna expected and harder. I know who you are, Miki said. I ran your foundation's real events until I could not stand what they became. So let us skip the part where you tell me you care. Most people wilt when Miki does that. Yuna, to her credit, did not. Fair, she said. Then let me be useful instead of sincere. Your sign-in binder is a disaster. May I? She sat down at the wobbling table and fixed it in 20 minutes. Attendance, emergency contacts, a real roster instead of loose paper. Her hands knew the work without asking her permission. For those 20 minutes, she was not a vice president or a successor or anybody's daughter. She was a competent woman doing unglamorous work for people who could do nothing for her in return. Miki watched from across the room and slowly uncrossed her arms. A girl named Emmy, maybe 14, watched the whole thing and then asked Yuna to look at her project, a little weather station built from a broken phone. Yuna looked. She asked the right questions. She did not check her own phone once. Nobody from the tower ever asks what it does, Emmy said. They ask if they can stand next to it for a second. Yuna went very still at that, and then she laughed once, with none of her charm anywhere in it. Nothing that honest had come out of her in weeks. She stayed 2 hours. She asked Miki what the program needed, all of it, and she wrote the answers down herself instead of handing it to an assistant. She left without taking a single photograph, which Miki noticed and mentioned to me later as if reporting a small miracle. That night, Yuna did something she had not done in years. She wrote a real proposal, not a Meridian gloss, not a Daichi template. 3 pages, in her own hand, for a genuine partnership with Hikari, a permanent room, paid coaches, a budget with real line items, and no shell contractor anywhere in it. She priced the heater. She named Emmy's weather station as a first showcase project, a real one, built by a real kid. For one evening, the girl who used to invent complaints against people who did not exist sat at her kitchen table and invented something true instead. She fell asleep with the pages beside her. For a week and a half, my old best friend stood at the edge of becoming real. I understood, better than anyone, how good it feels to build a true thing after years of building false ones. I let myself hope for her, which I had not done in a long time. Shun understood all of it too, and to him a legitimate Yuna read as a fire alarm going off in the middle of the night. A legitimate Yuna was the most dangerous thing in his world, not because it was wrong, but because it was a comparison. The day she built one real program, every fake one behind her would have to stand next to it and be measured. Her honesty would audit his entire architecture without a single subpoena, so he did not forbid it. Forbidding only makes a Takamori dig in. He reframed it instead, patiently. The same trick he ran on everything, until the safest road looked like a cliff. It is beautiful that you want this, he told her, and I can only reconstruct the shape of it. But I know his shape by now. But think it through. You build one honest center that works. Wonderful. And the first thing every reporter asks is why this one is real when the others were not. He let that sit. Your mother's condition is not a fresh start. It is a spotlight. You shine it on one true room, and it lights up every empty one behind you. The only way to protect the past is to make the present match it, he went on. One more clean-looking project done our way, and the record stays consistent. Honesty now is not brave, my love. It is a confession with better lighting. It was a lie. But it was a lie built on one true beam, and those are the only lies that hold. Going legitimate would invite the comparison. He took a fear she had earned honestly and pointed it away from the exit. And Yuna, 10 days into the most real thing she had done since I met her, felt the drop he had drawn under her feet and stepped back from the ledge of becoming herself. She chose the fake. The 3 handwritten pages went into a drawer, and the drawer stayed shut. She told her mother the Hikari partnership was moving forward, which was technically a sentence and completely a lie. Then, she let Daichi file a fresh set of tidy documents, dressing up a 4th center that would photograph beautifully and teach no one anything. Sayaka clocked the filing within a day. Same handwriting, same shell family, same everything, she told me. Except now, it is dated inside the month her mother gave her to go straight. Whatever that month was for, she spent it building a 4th diorama. She spent her one clean chance manufacturing one more clean-looking lie, because a man she trusted had convinced her the truth was a trap. And the worst part is that she was not entirely wrong. That is what makes it a tragedy instead of a crime. The truth was a trap. It was also a trap she could have walked out of with her mother beside her if she had used the door Reika kept holding open. Miki felt the door close from her side. The chairs did not come. The heater stayed broken. The vice president who had asked what they needed stopped answering, and the partnership that had felt for 10 days like it might be real dissolved into a press release nobody at Hikari had agreed to. She got our hopes up and vanished, Sora reported at the warehouse, and this time he was not confused. He was angry, in the flat, careful way of a kid who has learned that adults from tall buildings are weather, not people. Ms. Nagase says that is worse than never coming, he went on. The little kids keep asking when the new room opens. There is no new room. That was the cost, and it was a real one, not a document. Not $1. A basement full of teenagers had been shown a better version of their lives for 10 days, and then had it filed away as marketing. Yuna had not only wasted her own chance, she had spent theirs, and Emmy's weather station went back to being a broken phone that nobody from the tower would ever ask about again. Reika knew within the week. She did not confront her daughter because the condition had been an offer, not a leash, and she had promised herself she would not chase. But something in her settled into a harder shape. The shape of a mother who has accepted that love and rescue are 2 different verbs. I gave her the cleanest exit I know how to build, she told me, and she spent the month reinforcing the walls. I am done building doors she will not walk through, she said. She looked older saying it, and steadier, both at once. From here she chooses, and she lives inside what she chooses. I will not lie for her. I told her that. I meant it. What none of us saw, because we were all watching Yuna's slow tragedy, was the 2 of them deciding what to do about the picture in that kitchen. Yuna had carried it straight to Shun, and Shun had listened to her describe it with the focus of a man being handed a key. Her mother and Ren alone, laughing, easy, intimate. The consultant who had toppled her whole world, sitting in the CEO's kitchen like he owned the mornings. That is not a heartbreak, Shun said slowly, turning the image over. That is a weapon, if we photograph it correctly. They have been so careful to keep the romance clean and the investigation separate. 2 rooms, never touching. So we take one picture that puts them in the same room, he said. We do not have to prove he abused his access to her. We only have to make one image that everyone already wants to believe. Yuna hesitated, and I want to believe it was because some part of her remembered a boy bringing soup to a dorm. He found the fraud before any of this. The timeline does not work. Everyone knows the order. Everyone knows the order because your mother announced it from a microphone, Shun said. Orders can be re-remembered. All a picture has to do is make people ask the question again. Doubt is cheaper than proof, and it travels faster. He took her hand. You said you did not want anyone to think you needed help, so let us prove the great Ren Aizawa was never a hero. Only a man who found a lonely woman with a company and helped himself to both. They planned it like a shoot, because that is what it was. Ren and Reika met most Wednesdays at a quiet place off Kari's discreet list. All the picture needed was the right lens across the street, a long angle, and a caption that asked a question instead of stating a fact. A man leaning close to the CEO, a folder on the table that could be anything, labeled in the caption as everything. We do not accuse, Shun reminded her. We wonder in public with a very good photograph. Then we let the people who already resent him do the accusing for free. And Yuna, 10 days removed from the most honest thing she had ever done, hollowed out by a choice she could not take back, looking for anywhere to put a shame that would not fit inside her, said yes to a photograph. I did not know any of it. I was at the warehouse that weekend, helping a 15-year-old teach a robot to tell a dead battery from a sleeping one, feeling good about a heater I still had not been allowed to send. I thought the worst of it was behind us. The worst of it was in a strategy office across the city, being framed and cropped, and it had my face in it. The picture went up on a Thursday, and it was, I have to admit, a beautiful piece of work. Whoever Shun hired knew his craft. A long lens across a rainy street shot through the window of the quiet place where Reika and I met on Wednesdays. In it, I am leaning across the table toward her, close, my hand near hers. A thick folder sits between us, official looking. Her face is turned up to mine. There is one thing a photograph like that can look like, and it looks like a secret. The caption did the rest, wondering instead of accusing, precisely as Shun had promised her it would. Just how much does the CEO's boyfriend know about an investigation he was supposedly barred from? A question with no fingerprints on it. Bad news arrives as a shape in a group chat now, before the words finish loading, and that is how it reached me. Haruto sent it with 3 words. This is manufactured. Then Sayaka called, and then my phone became a small rectangle of strangers deciding who I was. Haruto came over that night and did the thing he does best, which is refuse to be impressed by production value. He put the photo on my laptop, blew it up, and started narrating like a man reading a menu he distrusted. Rain on the street, dry window, he said. That is a long lens from across the road through glass in weather. Nobody takes that shot by accident from the next table. Somebody booked a room across the street and waited for a Wednesday they already knew about. So, it is staged, I said, and heard the hope climb into my own voice. We can prove it is staged then, and make them eat it. We can prove the lens. We cannot prove the folder, Haruto said, tapping it. That folder is the whole trick. It is doing the acting. Empty a man's lunch receipts into a manila envelope, photograph it right, and suddenly it is the Pentagon Papers. He sat back, and here is the part I hate. Proving the photo was staged does not unask the question. The question is already loose. That is what these people sell, not lies. Questions. He was right, and it took the wind out of me because my whole instinct had been to prove the fake and win. You cannot win a question by disproving a photograph. The folder held restaurant receipts. I know because I remember the meal. It was the least incriminating object in the building. Within a day, the audit committee had what it wanted, which was never proof. It was cover. A member I had never met filed for an internal ethics inquiry into whether the investigation had been compromised by an improper relationship. My name, Reika's name, and the word improper, all in one sentence on company letterhead. The genius of it was that it turned our honesty into the weapon. We had been public and clean on purpose. Now every clean choice looked like a cover story. We had built 2 careful rooms, and Shun had photographed the doorway between them and called it a tunnel. I did what I do. I sat down at 1 in the morning and wrote the reply. It was a good one. I named the photographer's angle, the folder's contents, the timeline that cleared me. It was accurate and precise, and it would have been the single stupidest thing I did all year. Sayaka arrived at my apartment at 7 the next morning without being invited, which is how I learned she had a key from Kaori, which is a sentence I still have not fully recovered from. Give me the phone, she said, before coffee, before hello. I told her I had a statement, airtight, that corrected every single line of the caption. Give me the phone, Ren. She held her hand out flat, palm up, the gesture you use on a dog carrying something it should not have in its mouth. You are about to argue with a rumor, which is how you feed a rumor. Phone. I did not give her the phone, so she took it. She crossed my kitchen and lifted it out of my hand, scrolled to the draft, and read it while I stood there like a scolded intern. This is well written, she admitted. It is also a confession that you are emotionally involved enough to be defending yourself before sunrise. She pocketed my phone. They do not want your rebuttal to be wrong. They want it to exist. An angry man is a guilty man on camera. You get this back, she added, when you stop being a person who would send this. I told her I could not stand in my own kitchen doing nothing while 100,000 strangers decided I had bought my way into a fraud with a woman's loneliness. It was the truest ugly thing I had said in weeks, and she did not flinch from it. You can, and you will, Sayaka said. The second you defend the relationship, you make this about the relationship, and that is the only battlefield where they win. Let it be about the receipts, she said. The receipts are boring, and boring is bulletproof. She is right in a way that leaves no exit, and I hated the phone in her pocket almost as much as I was grateful for it. Reika did not get her phone taken away because Reika would never have written the letter in the first place. She had spent 20 years learning that the powerful do not explain. She called me from the tower, and her voice was the flattest I had ever heard it, which told me she was furious. They have put us in a beautiful trap, she said. If I defend you, I prove I am compromised, and the audit dies, and Yuna with it. If I say nothing, the story stands. If I break up with you to save the investigation, I hand them the ending they wrote, and I lose you for a photograph, she went on. Every door in this room opens onto them. I told her we would not pick a door they built. We do the one thing the frame cannot survive, I said. We go on being what we already told everyone we were. There was a silence, and then she made a sound that was almost a laugh. You want to fight a lie about a hidden relationship by refusing to hide the relationship. They photographed us having lunch. So we have lunch, I said, in the light. Same place, same day, and we let them take all the pictures they want of two people who have nothing to photograph. Haruto staged it, because staging honest things in public is his actual profession, and he came at it with the glee of a man who has waited months for permission to swing. You want a photograph they cannot use? Give them 100, he said. Front window, good light, nothing to hide. Bore them to death on camera. So that is what we did the following Wednesday, and it became the most closely watched boring meal of my life. Same restaurant, front window this time, no folder, Reika ordered loudly. I paid with my own card and made sure the waiter said my name. We talked about nothing publicly for an hour and let a dozen phones fail to find a crime in it. It helped a little. You cannot unask a question, but you can make the question look tired. The story did not die. It stopped being fun, which for a manufactured scandal is a slow leak in the tire. Across the city, Yuna watched her own weapon work, and none of it felt like she had expected it to feel. Shun sent her the engagement numbers like a gift. She looked at the photograph of a man she had known for 7 years, cropped into a stranger, and felt her stomach turn. She had wanted him gone. She had not, it turned out, wanted him branded a predator who preyed on her mother. Those were different wishes, and she had only just discovered the gap between them, standing over her phone at midnight. She said nothing to Shun about any of it. She stopped forwarding the story and hoped that counted as something. It did not. But she was not ready to know that yet. But the inquiry did not care about the leak or about Yuna's midnight second thoughts. The inquiry had its own machinery, and it ground forward on schedule. I was summoned, a barred private citizen, to answer for a relationship in front of a committee that had already decided the answer. They held it in a conference room I was technically forbidden to enter, which nobody found funny but me. 3 committee members, a lawyer, Shun in the corner as a courtesy of his office, and Kaori, taking minutes with a face carved from professional stone. They asked their questions in the soft passive voice institutions use when the verdict is already written. Was I aware of the appearance of impropriety? Had confidential findings ever been discussed in a personal setting? Did I understand the concern? No findings crossed between us, I said. By your own resolution, I have no access to anything to leak. The folder in your photograph is receipts. The timeline is on the record, announced by your CEO from a microphone months ago. Clean answers. Every one of them true. A committee member leaned forward and began a sentence about how even the appearance of a thing could damage the process. I did not let the appearance argument finish its lap. The appearance was manufactured on a rainy Wednesday with a rented lens, I said. You are not here about appearances. You are here because appearances are useful. So let us not pretend I can answer my way out of a room I was invited into to lose. Shun spoke one time in that entire hour. from his corner, mild as milk. Nobody is accusing anyone. We are simply protecting the integrity of the process. It was perfect. He had built the entire attack and then stood inside it, defending the thing he was demolishing, and the committee nodded at his reasonableness. The frame was never built to survive my answers. It was built to make my answers necessary. The moment a whistleblower has to defend himself, the whistle stops being the story. Shun watched me be as reasonable as he had needed me to be, and it changed nothing, because reasonable was never the game he was playing. Reika watched the same thing I watched, and she was not allowed to say a word. The recusal she had chosen to protect the investigation was now the muzzle that kept her from protecting me. Kaori told me later that Reika's hand had gone white around her pen and never moved the entire hour. The committee did not clear me and did not condemn me. It did the worst thing. It recommended continued review, which is bureaucratic, for we will keep this wound open as long as it stays useful. The cloud stayed. That was the whole point of the cloud. Kaori caught me at the elevators afterward and handed me a single printed page, face up, in her flat, weatherless voice. The minutes. Verbatim, including your answers, unedited. I keep clean records. Some records are useful to lawyers, some are useful to history, and I am rarely certain which until later, she said. She let the doors open. You answered well. It was the wrong room to answer well in. Go home. Shun had won again, cleanly. And I want to be honest about that, because a real enemy has to win real rounds, and he did. He had not beaten me with a lie I could disprove. He had beaten me by making the truth exhausting, and exhaustion is a thing no folder of receipts can fix. That night, Reika came to the apartment, off the clock, off the record, and for a while we did not talk about any of it. Then she said the thing she had been holding all day. I have never in my life been unable to protect someone I chose. I do not have a word for how much I hate it. You are protecting me, I said, by not touching it, by letting it be fair. It is the same thing you keep trying to give Yuna, and it is every bit as hard to receive. She did not answer, and her silence was its own kind of agreement, and we sat in it together, which is more than most people give you. But I was wounded in a way I had not been before. The gold digger story had insulted me. This one had cornered me. There is a difference between being called a name and being placed inside a shrinking room, and I had just felt the walls touch my shoulders. And that is where I made the decision. Not in anger, which is what people assume. In something colder and more dangerous than anger. In certainty. If they were going to make the story about me, I would drag it back to the truth, and one truth in particular had the weight to do it. Not receipts, not shells, a person. A witness who had been inside the very first lie and walked out rather than sign it. Miki Nagase. I called Sayaka that night and told her I wanted to bring Miki forward. Not eventually. Now. Her testimony about the borrowed children and the resignation would cut through the ethics smoke and put the fraud back at the center where it belonged. Sayaka went quiet in a way she rarely does, and when she spoke, every trace of the comedian was gone. Ren. Listen to me carefully, because I am only going to say this in plain words once. Miki Nagase is not a document. She is a woman with a small program, no lawyer, and no protection. The moment she is named, they will not fight her testimony. They will fight her. Her funding, her reputation, the kids who depend on that basement. You would be handing them a hostage. She walked out on them once already, I said. She has the spine for this. Spine is not armor, Sayaka said. You are barred, wounded, and cornered, and you have found a person whose truth would clear you. That should frighten you more than it does. Secure her first, she pressed. Get the program safe. Get her a lawyer. Get the Hikari money out from under Foundation control before you put her name in a single email. Weeks, not days. Protect the person, then use the proof. She was right. I want that on the record too. The same as when I insisted Yuna tried, because it matters that the warning was clear and I heard every word of it. I even remembered Reika, months back in a parking garage. A witness is a person before she is proof. Ren, do not forget the order of those two words. And I did not tell Reika what I was planning, which should have been the loudest alarm of all. I hid it from her precisely because I knew she would say the same thing Sayaka had just said, and I did not want to be stopped. I heard all of it, and I set it down because I was tired and cornered and certain. And certainty is the most expensive feeling I own. I told myself Miki was strong. I told myself speed was mercy, that the faster the truth came out, the less time they had to hurt anyone. I told myself I was protecting her by moving quickly. I was protecting me. That part stayed invisible to me for weeks because a drowning man cannot tell the difference between a rescue and a reflex. I am talking to her this week, I told Sayaka. I will be careful. Careful is not the same as slow, she said, and you only learn the difference after it costs you something. Do not do this, Ren. But she could hear it in my voice. The thing Reika had named months ago in a parking garage. The last addiction I had never quit. I ended the call while she was still building her next argument, which is what you do to a warning you have already decided to disobey. I found the number for a church basement across town, and I sat with it in my hand for a long time. Then I pressed call, a man about to help someone straight into the fire, certain, all the way down, that he was carrying water. The inquiry gave me a deadline, and a deadline is a cliff dressed up as a courtesy. The letter was cold and polite, which is how the expensive kind of threat always sounds. The committee would conclude its review in 1 week. Absent substantive evidence that the original findings were sound and independent of my personal relationship, it would recommend formal sanction and suspend the audit. Read the plain version. Prove the fraud is real in 7 days, or the whole thing gets buried under a scandal about my love life. And Yuna and Shun would walk free on the corpse of it. And Reika would lose either her company or her daughter or both. On a rainy Wednesday photograph, 7 days is not time to build a case. It is only time to panic on a schedule. I should have taken that letter to Reika. I should have taken it to Sayaka and let the two of them build a slow, safe answer. Instead, I read it alone at my kitchen table, twice, and let the clock do to me what clocks always do to a man like me. Haruto called that night. I let it ring. Sayaka texted, asking what the letter said, because of course she knew a letter had come. I told her it was nothing urgent, which was the first outright lie I had told an ally in this whole business, and it should have frightened me more than it did, because I had one thing that could not be argued with. Not a shell, not a receipt, not a photograph anyone could recaption. A person, someone who had stood inside the very first lie and walked out rather than sign it. Miki Nagase. I went to the church basement on a Tuesday evening after the teenagers had gone home. Miki was stacking folding chairs alone under a single working light. The broken heater ticked in the corner like something with a bad heart. She knew who I was before I finished the door. You are the man dating the CEO, she said, not stopping the chairs. The one who found the empty center. Sora talks about your warehouse. He thinks you hung the moon. I told him the moon does not need help hanging, she added, stacking another chair. What do you want, Mr. Aizawa? People from your world only come down these stairs when they need something carried. I need your help, I said, and watched her go still, because those 4 words had cost her before. She set the chair down and studied me. Then she waved at the stack she had built, an invitation to sit, and I understood she would hear me out because she was that kind of woman. Her kindness was the thing I had come down those stairs to spend. I laid it out. The fraud, the shells, the inquiry, the frame, the deadline. She listened without nodding once, which is how careful people listen, and when I finished, she pointed at a cardboard box on a shelf behind me. That is Emmy's weather station, she said. 14 years old. Built it from a phone she found in a gutter. The vice president who fixed our sign-in binder promised her a showcase, then vanished. Emmy has not been back since. Mickey looked at me steadily. So I already know what happens when tower people need a room to look full. You want me to be the room this time. I want you to tell them about the children at Ioba, I said. The ones they bust in for the photographs. The day you quit. Your account predates my relationship. It predates the shells. You are a human being who was there, and no caption can turn you into a gold digger. They can turn anyone into anything. She said it without drama. The way you report weather you have stood in. You think I walked out clean? I spent a year being called unstable by people who never met me until the phone stopped ringing and I ended up here with a broken heater and no salary. That is what happens to whoever says the true thing first, she said. I have 20 kids now and a quiet place to keep them. Quiet is the whole deal. Quiet is how I keep them. That was the moment Sayaka's voice should have been the loudest thing in my skull. Protect the person, then use the proof. Weeks, not days. Secure her first. I heard it. I want to be honest that I heard it, standing in that cold room, while a frightened, decent woman told me plainly what the truth had already cost her once. This is the part I cannot dress up or explain away. I talked her into it anyway. I told her this time would be different. I told her she would not be alone, that I would protect her, that the truth had a spine behind it now. I believed every word, which is the worst part. A lie you know you are telling is a smaller sin than one you have convinced yourself is a rescue. If I do this, Mickey said, after a stretch of silence I did not dare fill, there are things you should know. Hikari has a city grant pending, small. It is the difference between a room next year and no room at all. And the church only lets us use the basement because we are quiet and we cause no trouble. She went on. I am a woman who causes no trouble now. That is the arrangement that keeps these kids a place to go. Do you understand what you are asking me to risk? Nothing touches Hikari, I promised. Your testimony is about Ioba, about the foundation, about a lie you already walked away from. It has nothing to do with a church basement across town. You have my word. I had no right to that word. I did not control the grant or the church or the men I was about to provoke. I gave it because I needed her to say yes, and she said yes because she was tired of the lie and because a man had looked her in the eye and promised. Sayaka called me the moment she heard, which was that same night. Tell me you got her a lawyer. Tell me you moved the grant somewhere safe. Tell me you did one single thing, I said. There is a deadline, I said. 7 days. It was the only defense I had, and it was not a defense. It was an excuse wearing a wristwatch. The silence on the line was the loudest thing she ever handed me. Then you have chosen the deadline over the woman, she said. I hope it clears your name. I truly do, because the bill for this will not arrive at your address. Then the line was dead, and I was left holding a defense nobody had stayed to hear. I submitted Mickey's signed account to the committee 2 days later, and for about 18 hours, it worked the way I had dreamed it would work. Her testimony was clean, specific, impossible to caption. Real children bussed to Ioba, handed shirts and pizza, and taken away before dinner. A guest book she refused to sign. A resignation written the same week. It landed on the inquiry like cold water on a sleeping room. One committee member read her account aloud and then set it down like it was warm. The lawyer asked a question nobody in that room had asked yet, which was whether the panel had been chasing the wrong scandal entirely. Suddenly the story was not about a lonely CEO and her boyfriend. It was about a witness with no stake and no grudge anyone could name, describing a fraud that happened long before I ever kissed Reika Takamori. The ethics cloud thinned. 2 committee members who had wanted me gone stopped returning Shun's calls. The board reopened a question it had voted closed. I had drawn real blood at last, and for most of a day I let myself feel like the smartest man in the city. Then Shun did the thing I had sworn to Mickey he could not do. He did not argue with her testimony. He never even mentioned Aoba. He turned his whole machine and he attacked the woman. It began as a whisper and became a press item in under a day, in language I recognized because I had read it about myself. Disgruntled former employee, a history of instability, litigious, a woman with a grievance, resurfacing conveniently to help a man already under an ethics cloud. Meridian did not have to prove a single word. They only had to make her radioactive, and radioactive is cheap. Everything near her caught fire at once. The City Grant Committee, allergic to controversy, tabled Hikari's application pending a review of the coordinator's fitness. The church, which had hosted a quiet woman who caused no trouble, got a concerned call about liability and a scandal and asked Mickey, with real regret, to clear the basement by month's end. 2 small donors went silent overnight. None of it was aimed at Hikari. That was the cruelty Sayaka had seen, and I had not. They never needed to touch the program. They only needed to touch Mickey, and Mickey was the program. Burn the coordinator, and the room she held together simply falls down, and 20 teenagers lose the one place that was ever theirs. I had built a door for the fraud to walk out of, and the fraud had walked out swinging at a church basement. I did what I always do. I tried to fix it fast, alone, using the same reflex that had caused it. I called the grant office and got a voicemail. I called the church, and a kind, firm man explained that they simply could not host a controversy near children. I called a donor and was told politely that they wished the best for the young people, but could not be associated with a scandal. Every call I made as Ren Aizawa, the man under an ethics cloud, made it worse. I was the scandal now, and my fingerprints poisoned everything I touched. The fixer who could solve anyone's problem with a phone and a good memory had found the one problem his own name made worse every time he opened his mouth. Sora came to the warehouse on Saturday and did not touch his robot. They are closing us, he said. Ms. Nagase says the grant is gone. The church wants us out, and she cannot get hired anywhere because her name is in the papers as some kind of crazy person. He looked at me, and there was no hero worship left in his face. She did the true thing. You said the true thing was worth it. His voice cracked, 15 and furious. Was it? I did not have an answer. He told me Emmy had stopped coming for good, her weather station back in its box under her bed. The little kids kept asking when the room would open, the same question they had asked when Yuna vanished. Except this time the room was not delayed. It was gone, and I had helped close it. Haruto had heard the whole exchange from across the warehouse. When Sora left, he came over and did not say I told you so, because he is a better friend than that. You made this, he said simply. So the question is not whether you feel bad. The question is what you are willing to do that is not about you feeling better. I do not know yet, I admitted. Haruto looked around his warehouse, at the folding chairs and the staging gear and the van, the whole apparatus of making real things happen in real rooms. I do, he said, but you have to ask for it, out loud, like a person who needs help. That has always been the part you skip. Across the city, Yuna watched the same story spread and felt something turn in her that she could not name. She had signed off on ruining Ren. She had not signed off on this. She recognized the Meridian language, the same knives that had once been aimed at her, now buried in a woman whose only crime was running a real program for real kids. Was that necessary? She asked Shun, and hated how small the question sounded. She teaches teenagers in a basement. Shun did not look up from his screen. She was a weapon aimed at us. I disarmed her. Sentiment about basements is how people lose companies, my love. And Yuna went quiet and filed the moment away. One grain of sand in a shoe she would be walking in for months. Reika found out what I had done from the news, like a stranger, which answers by itself how far around her I had gone. She came to my apartment that night, and she did not sit down. You used her, she said, not shouting. Quiet, level, worse than shouting. I told you in a parking garage the first night. A witness is a person before she is proof. I said it because I have watched powerful people do this very thing for 20 years, she went on, and I did not want the man I chose to become one of them. And here you are, on schedule. I was cornered, I said. The deadline, the sanction, the whole audit about to die in a week. You were cornered, so you spent someone poorer than you to buy your way out, Reika said. You did it fast and alone, and you hid it from me because you knew what I would say. That is not the man who walked out of my daughter's party, she said. That is the man my daughter has become. You reached for the nearest person, used them, and called it courage. It went all the way through me because it was true, and because she had named the one thing I could not survive being. That for 1 week, I had become Yuna. I can fix it, I started, and she cut me off with a look I had never received from her, the one she had spent 20 years perfecting for people who had disappointed her past repair. You cannot fix it by yourself. That is the entire lesson, and it has a body count now, she said. 20 children, a woman who trusted you. And do not go fix this alone at 2 in the morning, using the same hands that broke it, she said. Touch this like you touch everything else, and you will only find a new person to spend. She left. She did not slam the door. She closed it with the same terrible care she gave everything, and that gentleness was the loudest sound in my life. I sat in the dark a long time, and for once, no clever plan assembled itself. No folder, no angle, a broken heater ticking somewhere in my memory, a boy asking me whether it had been worth it, and a promise I had broken before the ink dried on it. My phone buzzed once, Sayaka, and I braced for the words I had earned. Instead, she had sent one line. When you are done drowning, the work is still here, and so am I. It was not forgiveness. It was a hand left in the water, and I understood I did not deserve it, and would have to become someone who did. Then Mickey called. I almost did not answer, because I did not deserve to. When I did, her voice was steady, which was worse than tears. They gave us until the day after tomorrow, she said. The church needs the basement cleared. The grant is dead. I am not asking you for anything, Ren. I called because the kids should hear it from someone who at least meant well. 48 hours. I had traded a real room full of real children for 18 good hours of clearing my own name. And the bill had come due at the address Sayaka named, which was never mine. Do not clear anything yet, I said. And my voice did not sound like a fixer's anymore. It sounded like a man starting over from nothing. 2 days. Give me 2 days. Not alone this time, and not fast, I said. You and those kids get protected before I say one more word about proof to anybody. Mickey was quiet. You promised me that once already, she said. I know, that one I borrowed. This one, I earn. 2 days. She was silent, and then she said, all right, in the voice you saved for the last person you have left. Then she was gone, and the clock started, and I had spent everything I owned for the right to run it. 48 hours is not enough time to win. I knew that going in, so I stopped trying to win and started trying to protect, which turns out to be a different job entirely, done with different tools by a different kind of man. The old me would have spent that clock like he spent everything else, alone, fast, at 2 in the morning, building a masterstroke. And I had a masterstroke available. Sayaka held enough paper to blow the whole fraud into the open and forced Takamori to save Hikari just to stop the bleeding. One email, and the tower would rescue the program to protect itself. I did not send it. That was the first decision, and it was the hardest. And I wanted on the record because of how badly the old me wanted to. I laid the folder on the table and sat there looking at it long enough for the coffee to go cold. Sayaka watched me do it. "That folder saves the program tonight," she said. "It also puts Mickey back on every front page as the scandal woman and drags the teens into a war between rich people." "I know," I said. "I already made those kids pay tuition for that lesson once." I closed the folder and slid it back to her. "We do it the slow way. We protect the people first, and the proof waits." Sayaka looked at me like an auditor rechecking a sum that had come out right on the 4th try. "Say that again, so I believe you have a pulse." I said it again. She almost smiled. "Good. Then let me tell you the part you never learned. You cannot do the slow way alone. Go ask for help, out loud, like a person." So I did the thing I always skip. I called Haruto at 6 in the morning with no plan, which was new for me. "I need you," I said, "not for an angle. For the trade you actually practice, a room, real logistics, people who show up. I broke something, and I cannot fix it by myself, and I am done pretending I can." There was a pause, and then my friend said the kindest cruel thing anyone said to me all year. 7 years. 7 years I have been waiting for that sentence, and you had to break a church basement to find it. Then, because he is who he is, he added, "The warehouse is yours, Candace Street. Let us go build a childhood that does not fold up into a van at lunchtime." The problem broke into 3 pieces, and not one of them was proof. A place, a shield for Mickey, and money that could not be poisoned by touching my name or Reika's. We took the place first, because a program with nowhere to meet is only a memory. Haruto's warehouse was raw, concrete, and echo, but it was his, on a real lease. It was owned by a man Shun could not call the pastor about. No landlord to spook, no grant to table, a roof that answered to nobody in that tower, which is the one commodity a man like Shun has never learned how to buy. By 9 that morning, the warehouse had started to fill, and this is the part I will remember when I am old. Haruto stood in the middle of the floor with a clipboard, running it like the stage manager he is, turning an empty building into a program in real time. Tables along the north wall. "Power drops there and there," he called out. "Somebody find me 20 chairs that match, and if you cannot match them, find me 40 that do not, and we will call it character." His crew cleared a third of the floor, folding tables he owned outright, staging lights off 100 real events, and a heater, a working one, which I did not order and did not pay for, because I had learned by then what separates help from the thing I do instead of help. Sora arrived with 6 Hikari teenagers and a plan I had not given him. "We did not come here to sit still and be rescued," he informed me. 15 and unimpressed. "We came to work. Where do you want us?" I sent them to Haruto, who put them on cable runs and had them useful in 4 minutes, because nothing heals a kid like being needed for real. A parent came too, Emi's mother, who did not bring Emi, and who looked at me with a careful neutrality I had earned. She stayed anyway and coiled cable, and that was its own small verdict I chose to accept. Sayaka came with the second piece already handled, because that is Sayaka. "I found Mickey a lawyer," she said, dropping into a folding chair, "a friend who eats reputation cases for breakfast, working at cost. He sent the grant committee and the church a very quiet letter about the difference between a concern and a defamation," she went on. "The whispers will not vanish, but they will get careful, and careful is expensive for people who deal in cheap. But before any of that, I went to Mickey myself, and I did not lead with proof, because leading with proof was the whole disease. I found her packing the basement into boxes, and I did not tell her I had a plan that would fix everything. I broke a promise to you," I said, "so no more big ones. 3 small true things instead, and you can say no to any of them. A space to meet in, a lawyer to make the smears stop, and her name defended by the people who know her, not by a document that turns her into a headline again." "And the proof?" Mickey asked, testing me, because she had every right. "The receipts that clear me?" "They wait," I said. "They wait until you and those kids are safe. and not 1 second sooner. Protecting you is not step 1 of clearing my name, I said. It is the only step that matters, and it has no step 2 hiding behind it. She studied me the way you study a bridge you have already fallen through once, testing the boards with your weight before you trust any of them. You mean it this time, she said, not quite a question. I am trying to be a person who means it, I said. Let me carry a box. Let me be wrong about half of what I suggest, and let me still be here after the cameras would have gone home. That was the shield for Mickey, and notice what it was made of. No receipts, no bombshell with my name under it. A lawyer telling them to stop, and worth more than any lawyer, a neighborhood that made the lie look stupid out loud. Because the teens did the thing no document could do, and Sora organized it without me, which is the entire point. A dozen kids and their parents wrote to the church in their own words about what that basement had been to them. Not a scandal. A place their children were safe on the nights nobody else wanted them. The pastor read 14 handwritten letters from families in his own congregation and found he had been about to evict his own neighbors on the word of a PR firm he had never met. The church did not take us back in the end, but it stopped being the villain. It let us leave with the furniture and the dignity, and it told the grant committee that whatever the papers claimed, these were good kids and a good woman. A community that knows you is the one weapon a smear cannot buy. Shun was not idle while we scrambled. He worked the same phones we did in the opposite direction, trying to make the shutdown permanent. He let it be known in the careful rooms that any funder who touched Hikari was touching a scandal and possibly a lawsuit. He was very good at it. 2 organizations that might have helped went quiet before we even finished dialing. He even reached the grant committee directly, an anonymous concern here, a worried word there, to make sure the tabled applications stayed tabled. What he did not count on was 14 letters from his own city, from parents who voted and paid taxes and did not care what a PR firm thought. The committee, faced with a smear on one side and its own constituents on the other, quietly agreed to hear Hikari again. It was not a victory. It was a door Shun could not fully close, and doors he cannot close are the only kind that matter to me now. That left the third piece, money. And it was the one Shun was still hunting, so it had to come from a direction none of us controlled. Reika tried to end it with a phone call. She came to the warehouse, saw the concrete and the folding tables and the kids hauling boxes, and 20 years of solving by authority rose up in her like a reflex. I can fund this by dinner, she said, low, almost to herself. A foundation grant, arm's length, clean paperwork, 1 call, and these children never worry about a room again. And I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. No, I said, and it was the hardest word I have ever handed someone I love. If Takamori money touches this program, it belongs to the case. It becomes the CEO funding her boyfriend's cause while the audit runs, I said. They will say you bought it. They will say I traded a woman's ruin for a grant, and they will not be entirely wrong. So I stand here and watch, Reika said, and I heard the same helplessness from the ethics room, the muzzle of her own power. You are asking me to love these children by not saving them. I am asking you to trust that saving is not the only verb, I said, and gave her own lesson back to her, gently. The same thing you tried to teach Yuna. The same thing you told me in a parking garage, before I was ready to hear it. She held my eyes, and I watched 20 years of habit lose an argument in real time. Then, she did the bravest thing I ever saw her do. She put the checkbook away, picked up a box of cables, and the CEO of Takamori Group spent an hour as a volunteer nobody photographed. The clean money came from Kari, off the books on her own time, which is how she handles anything that matters. She called me on hour 30 with no greeting at all. There is a small independent trust that funds youth programs with no corporate strings, she said. I do not work for them. I have merely, as a private citizen who files things, made certain the right person received the right facts about a good program in trouble. A pause. I was never here. My involvement is a rumor you cannot source. Do continue. The line clicked dead on the word continue, because gratitude to Kaori is a compliance risk with a paper trail. The trust did not care about scandals in a tower where they had no stake. They cared that a working program with a decade of real kids had lost its space to a smear. They funded a year, small money, clean money, money with no Takamori fingerprint anywhere on it, money nobody could ever stand up and call a bribe or a purchase because it was neither. When Kaori's trust confirmed the year of funding, Haruto called it out across the warehouse floor, and for 10 seconds, nobody in that room did anything but breathe. A teenager whooped. Emi's mother put down her cables and pressed both hands over her mouth. Mickey did not celebrate. She sat down on a folding chair, very suddenly, the way a person sits when her legs have carried a weight so long that permission to stop arrives as a shock. By hour 40, we had a home, a lawyer, a community, and a year of independent funding. Hikari was not saved by a bombshell. It was saved by a dozen people, each doing the one real thing they were good at, out in the open, in the light. I did not sleep for 2 days, and I want to be honest that the cost was not only noble. I burned myself down to the wire. I made calls until my voice went and hauled boxes until my hands shook, running on gas station coffee and the specific fuel of a man buying back something he had broken. And I bought back less than I broke, because that is how it works. Emmy did not come back. Some trust, once spent, does not refund. Mickey forgave me slowly and never entirely, and she was right not to, and I stopped needing her to in order to keep showing up. There was another cost, quieter and permanent. Hikari now lived entirely outside Takamori, on independent money, in a building the company did not own. That meant it could never be folded back in, never be counted in Rika's numbers, never become the good deed that redeemed the empire. I had saved it by putting it forever beyond the reach of the woman I loved and the company she ran. Some part of me had wanted to hand her that win. I gave it to the kids instead, and a year earlier I could not have made that trade with a gun at my head. But on the second night, in a concrete warehouse on Candace Street, 20 teenagers ran a real program in a real room with a working heater. Not one banner, not one camera, not one plant that arrived by van. The photographic negative of the empty lab, a room that was full because it was true. Mickey was in the doorway, watching her kids, and she said the thing that undid me. "You did not fix it, Ren. You know that. What you did was smaller and better. You helped, and then you got out of the way, and you let it belong to us." She almost smiled. "Nobody from your world has ever handed me anything without photographing themselves doing it. You did. Write that on your tombstone." Sora set his battery robot on a table, and a younger kid asked him to teach her how it worked, and he did. I stood in the back, where I belonged now, useful and invisible in the good way for once. And I did not reach for my phone to fix a single thing. Reika found me there, at the edge of a room I had helped build and did not own. She did not talk about the case. She took my hand, the same grip as that first night in her office, and said, "You did it the hard way." "I did it the only way that does not cost a person," I said. It took me 9 hard lessons and a program I loved to learn the difference. We were not fully healed. You do not repair a fracture like the one I caused in a single warehouse night. But she was holding my hand, and the kids were loud, and it was, against everything, a beginning instead of an end. For the record, she added, watching Sora teach a younger girl to solder, I have never in my life been prouder of losing an argument. Do not tell the board I said the word proud about a program I am not allowed to fund. It was the closest thing to a joke she had made in weeks, and I took it as the beginning of a forgiveness I had not finished earning. What I did not see, because my eyes were on the children instead of the enemy for once, was happening across the city in a strategy office, where my worst mistake was about to save the woman who caused it. Yuna had gone to Shun's office late to talk about the Hikari mess she could not stop thinking about. He was not there. His screen was, and it had not locked, and a folder was open on it, and her own name sat at the top of a document she had never written. She sat down slowly. It was a timeline. A careful, patient reconstruction of the entire fraud, every shell and signature, arranged to prove one clean story. That Yuna Takamori had built all of it, alone. That Shun had only ever tried, tragically, to protect the woman he loved from her own crimes. There was a note at the bottom, in his tidy hand, the same hand that had once written useful until spring. Grief-stricken fiancé survives. Sole author does not. Yuna understood it in the one moment when telling anyone meant confessing everything. She had never been the architect of a single thing. She had only ever been the room the fraud was decorated in, kept quiet and pretty, waiting for the day a camera would need a face to blame. I was not in the room for most of what happened next, and I am glad. Some collapses you should only hear about secondhand once the worst of the dust has already settled. But I pieced it together later, from Kaori, from Yuna herself in the end, and from the one night she almost walked back into my life and could not. It started with a folder on an unlocked screen, and a daughter learning she had never been the author of her own crime. Yuna did not sleep the night she read Shun's timeline. She went back to it the next morning, calm, and did the thing he had taught her to do. She gathered information before she reacted. What she found was worse than a single document. It was a system, built with a ruler, over 2 patient years. Every signature on every fake center was hers. Every routing stamp went through the Office of Strategy, but strategy is a department, not a name, and departments do not go to prison. Shan's own hand was almost nowhere. He had spent 2 years being the architecture and never the signature. She had spent 2 years being the signature and never once seeing the architecture. She understood it then, fully, which is how anyone understands a trapdoor. Afterward, he had not fallen in love with a powerful heir. He had selected a frightened one. He had taught her to lie, and positioned himself a half step behind her so that when the floor gave way, only her weight would find the drop. For a whole day, Yuna sat with the fact that the man she was going to marry had been building her coffin since their second date. He had called it a partnership. She had said yes to it twice with a ring. Then she found the last file in the folder, and it took the air out of the room. It was a statement, a public apology, drafted in careful, humble language, written in the first person. Written in her voice. I take full responsibility for lapses in oversight of programs under my direction. It was dated for no day in particular, waiting for its day. He had already written her confession for her and left the date blank and saved it next to the receipts like a suit pressed and hanging for a funeral he intended to schedule. And then she felt something she had not felt since she was a child. She needed help, real help, not applause, not a fixer for an event, but someone to stand between her and the thing coming for her. One person in her whole life had ever done that for her without a bill attached, and she had branded him her personal assistant in front of investors, framed him as a predator, and burned every bridge to him, then salted the river underneath. I know about the night she came to the warehouse because I saw her, though she does not know that I did. It was late. The Hikari kids had gone home, and I was stacking chairs, which is apparently my whole personality now. I looked up through the big front window, and there she was. Across the street, under the one working streetlight, not moving. She stood there a long time. I did not go out. I told myself it was because I did not know why she was there, which was true, and because I was afraid of what I would do if she asked me to fix it, which was truer. She watched me through the glass, standing in a warehouse full of the real things she had spent her whole career photographing instead of building. I think she was hunting for the sentence. Ren, I am in a trap I cannot get out of, and you are the only one who ever pulled me out. She never found it. Pride is the one asset she hoards, and it does not spend, not even to save a life. After a while, she turned and walked back into the dark, and by the time I reached the door, the street was empty. I stood there, holding my phone longer than I want to admit. I even typed her name into a message. I know that look, I wrote, then deleted it. A text from me was the last thing that frightened woman could afford to receive, and rescuing people who had not asked was the reflex that had already cost 20 children a room. I put the phone away. Growth is mostly a list of things you no longer do. Her mother had named that months ago. The daughter who cannot ask. I stayed in that doorway and understood I had just watched a drowning person decide to sink rather than shout. And there was nothing left for me to do except the one thing I had trained myself out of, grabbing someone who has not asked to be grabbed. So I let the door close, and I hated how much I had grown. Kaori called the next day about something else entirely, and slipped it in at the end, where she files everything that matters. Yuna is behaving strangely, agreeing to everything, choosing wedding flowers with the enthusiasm of a woman planning her own funeral. Is that not Yuna under pressure? I asked. No, Kaori said. Yuna under pressure fights. This is Yuna deciding something and hiding it. I have watched her since she was small. She has that face. I do not know what it means yet. I dislike not knowing. The next morning, Yuna stopped waiting to be rescued and tried to save herself. If Shun's whole plan depended on his hand staying invisible, then she would make it visible. She began to document him, carefully, without a word to anyone. She photographed the annex order, the 6-day building nobody had signed but him. She traced the core path registration back to the messages he had sent setting it up. She saved the coaching notes he had fed her tablet during the succession test, time-stamped, in his own voice. None of it, alone, was clean enough to hang him. but it was the first evidence in 2 years that pointed at the architect instead of the signature. She gathered it in silence with steady hands, her mother's daughter at last. And once she nearly got caught, Shun came back to the office early and found her at his side of the desk. She did not flinch. She smiled, kissed him, and said she had been leaving him a note about the caterer. He believed her, or seemed to, and she walked to the elevator with her heart going like a trapped bird and a phone full of his fingerprints in her pocket. For 3 days, she believed she was winning. She had never been the strategist in that relationship, and she let herself feel like a woman finally learning the game she had been losing for 2 years. She had forgotten that Shun taught her everything she knew about hiding, which meant he could read the hiding better than anyone alive. He noticed the small things, a folder accessed at an odd hour, her eyes going to his laptop when he entered a room, the particular brightness of a person who has a secret and thinks it is safe. He did not confront her. Confrontation is for people without better options. Instead, he took her to dinner, somewhere lovely, and waited until the second course. Then he told her, warmly, that he had moved all the sensitive original records into his personal lawyer's custody, sealed, for the protection of them both. In case anyone ever tries to hurt us with them, he said, holding her hand across the table. The story is written down and notarized now, my love. Whatever happens, no one can rearrange the truth after the fact. She understood the sentence hiding under the sentence. He had secured the originals where she could never reach them, and written the narrative where she could never edit it. Her 3 days of quiet photographs were suddenly worth almost nothing. He owned the source. She owned copies of a story he had already sealed, with her name printed on the byline. And the wedding, he added lightly, cutting into his fish. I think we move it up. A united front reads better to a nervous board. A married couple protects each other, he said. It would look strange now for either of us to suddenly stand alone, and there it was. He slid a prenuptial across the table too, over coffee, as if it were the dessert menu. Standard, he called it, protective. It contained a clause about shared liability for business decisions made during the engagement, buried in language designed to be signed and not read. She read it. Of course she read it now. It would make her legally, jointly, gently responsible for everything they had ever touched together, which meant everything with her name on it and nothing with his. She signed it, smiling, because refusing would have told him she had learned to read the fine print. And a mark who reads is a mark who runs. Marry him and be the loyal wife whose devoted husband shields her, or refuse and be the sole author standing by herself over the drop. He had turned her one move against her and closed another exit, all while smiling over dessert. Of course, Yuna heard herself say. You are right. You are always right. She smiled, and it was the finest performance of her life. Because inside it, she had just gone somewhere he could not follow. Because that was the night Yuna Takamori broke from Shun, silently, completely, and she told no one. On the outside, she became the perfect fiancée. She agreed to the date, chose the flowers, played the united front for every camera. On the inside, she was a different person than the one who had framed me. She had a wedge now, small and dangerous. She knew what he was. He did not know that she knew. And inside that gap, she had something 2 years of his careful management had never permitted her. A secret of her own. She could not use it, and that was the cruelty of her position, which I felt even as her former victim. Any move against Shun required admitting she had helped build the fraud. To expose the architect, she had to confess she was the signature. Every road out of the trap ran straight through her own confession. So she waited and planned and married a man she intended to destroy, and looked, to everyone watching, like a woman getting everything she ever wanted. Reika watched the wedding preparations with a stillness Kaori found unbearable. Mothers read this stuff off the air in a room, and what she read was a daughter who was not happy but decided. And she said nothing, because she had promised not to chase, and a promise is the one thing that woman does not break. Reika had to stand next to it too, and smile. There was an engagement dinner, a company affair, and she was seated 3 feet from the man she suspected of building the whole fraud, watching him toast her daughter, forbidden by her own recusal from saying a single true word. Kaori told me Reika held her glass through the entire toast and never drank from it. The most powerful woman in the city, watching a man she could not touch, marry a daughter she could not reach, in a room she was not allowed to save. The title of my whole strange life could have been printed on that place card. Everyone's favor and no one's rescue. Should I say something? Reika asked me once, and it was the only time she ever let the mother show through the CEO. I gave her a door. She will not use it. Do I break my own word and drag her through it? No, I said, and it cost me, because I loved her and could see it hurting her. You taught me that yourself. You cannot save someone who has not asked. All you can do is leave the door open and be standing on the other side of it the day she runs. She nodded and hated it and kept her word. What reached me at the time was smaller than any of that, and it turned out to matter more. The teenagers had decided they were done being props. It started at the warehouse, because that is where the real thing lived now. Sora and the Hikari kids had watched their program get saved, not by a hero, but by a room of ordinary people telling the truth in public. The lesson had stuck harder than any adult intended. There is a thing about this I cannot work out, Sora said one evening, robot in pieces between us. They shut us down over a scandal somebody invented, he said. But the real fake, the empty centers, the pretend classes, all that money, nobody ever answers for. Why do the liars get a quiet life and we get the news? Because nobody with a microphone has ever had to stand in front of the people they lied about, I said. The reports never face the kids in the reports. He went quiet, the way he does before he decides something. Then maybe the kids should ask for the report ourselves, he said, in public, out loud, where they cannot table us. Every instinct I had spent 7 years building wanted to take that idea and run it, book the room, write the questions, stage it, make it perfect, make it mine. I did not. That is the whole distance I had traveled, measured in one swallowed sentence. If you do this, it has to be yours, I said. Your questions, your voices, your names on it. I can help you build a stage, I told him. I cannot stand on it for you, and I will not. Sora looked at me with the flat certainty of a kid who knew what tower people cost. We know. That is why we are asking you and not one of them, he said. You are the only one who ever offered to hold the ladder instead of climbing it. So Haruto taught them how to book a hall and run a live stream, and the parents organized childcare and food, and the whole thing was built by the people it belonged to, with me holding cables in the back. I watched Sora write the invitation himself, crossing out every word that sounded like an adult. He kept it to plain sentences a kid could read aloud without blushing. When he asked me to check it, I found one comma to move and left everything else alone, and it was the proudest edit I have ever not made. They put out a simple public call. They asked the Takamori Future Foundation to hold an open forum and give a real, itemized accounting of the money spent on youth programs in front of the youth. It was polite, it was reasonable. It was signed by children. It named the empty Aoba Center out loud, and it asked one question no PR firm on earth could answer with the word synergized. Where did all of the money go, and why were we the ones sent home? By the time it reached the group chats and then the city, Shun Kuroda understood he was no longer fighting a barred consultant or a recused CEO. He was about to be questioned in public by the one group of people he had never accounted for and could not buy, sue, or reframe. Children have no reputation to threaten, and a haul of them, asking for a receipt, was the one weapon none of his careful answers had ever been built to survive. His first move was the one I expected because it was the only one he owned. Within a day, the whisper started in Meridian's voice. The forum was not children asking questions. It was a bitter man using children as human shields, coaching them, hiding behind them, the gold digger's newest and lowest trick. I read it and felt almost nothing, which surprised me. Months ago, that smear would have had me drafting a rebuttal until sunrise. I forwarded it to Sora with 3 words. They are scared. You only reframe the people you cannot beat. Shun had told the whole city, in his own careful way, that a dozen teenagers with a live stream and a real receipt frightened him more than any auditor alive. The forum was set for a Saturday, in a community hall Haruto booked with his own name so nobody could cancel it out from under a child. 200 folding chairs, 1 live stream, no banner that said anything about tomorrow. I want to be clear about my job that day because it is the whole point of who I had become. I ran cables, I tested a microphone, I stood in the back, and I did not write one word anybody said. Shun spent the week before it trying to make sure the forum never happened, and when that failed, trying to make sure it happened his way. First, he tried the quiet route, the one that usually works. Someone from the foundation reached out to a few of the families, warm and concerned, offering scholarships, real ones, paid tuition, a mentorship, a future, for any teen who decided the forum was a mistake. It was a good offer, and the cruelty of it was surgical. He was not bribing them. He was making them choose between their own kid's future and everyone else's truth, which is the most expensive question you can put in a poor family's mouth. One family said yes. I do not blame them, and neither did Sora, and that told me he had grown up somewhere along the way too. They took the scholarship, he told me, not angry. Their kid needs it. That is real. We do not get to be mad at people for feeding their own. He shrugged. We have to be true enough that it works without them. They came for Sora directly too, the day before. A man with a nice watch and a nicer offer found him at the warehouse and explained, kindly, that a bright boy could have a future or a grievance, not both, and that the foundation would love to sponsor a future. Sora heard him out with the patience you give a magic trick whose secret you worked out in the first 10 seconds. Then he said, "You are offering to pay me to not ask where the money went. Do you hear that out loud?" The man left without an answer. Sora came and found me afterward, a little pale. "I think I just turned down more money than my mom makes in 3 years, he said. Was that stupid? No, I told him. That was the least stupid thing anybody has done in front of me in years. Then Shun tried the other thing, the smear, because it is the only other tool he owns. By Thursday, the story was everywhere. The forum was a stunt. A bitter ex-consultant, the gold digger himself, hiding behind children to attack the family that rejected him. My face was in it again. Rootless, vengeful, using kids as a shield, the same pen, the same fingerprints, meridian on every cuff. The old me would have been up all night with a rebuttal. The new me forwarded it to Haruto and went to sleep because no paragraph answers a smear like that. Only the children themselves, all of them, in public, refusing to be anybody's shield. The night before, the kids were terrified, and I did the hardest thing a former fixer can do. I did not fix it. I did not write them a script or promise them it would be fine. You will be scared up there, and that is the correct response, I told them. Scared means you understand what it costs. Nobody needs you to be brave. Be true, which is a thing you already are. I will be in the back the whole time, holding a cable, useless and proud. Sayaka came to and stood beside me and watched a dozen amateurs prepare to do in one afternoon what she had been unable to do in months of flawless audit. They are about to beat me to it, she murmured, not upset. A year of clean paper, and the punch lands from a 14-year-old with a phone photo. I have never been so happy to be redundant. Mickey was there, quiet, watching the kids she had kept alive in a basement now stand up in the light. She did not speak. She held Emmy's mother's hand, two women who had traded hope for disappointment, and back again more times than anyone should have to. Saturday came. The hall filled past its 200 chairs, people standing along the walls, phones up, the live stream number climbing in the corner of a laptop nobody was hiding. The foundation sent Daichi Mori. Of course it did. Shun was far too smart to stand on that stage himself, so he sent the replacement, the ambitious man who signed everything. Coach threw an earpiece from a seat in the third row where Shun sat with his hands folded like a man at church. Yuna did not come. She watched the live stream from somewhere else, alone. And I did not know until later that she watched every second of it with her hand over her mouth. She watched a girl of 14 hold up a photo of the empty room and understood, all the way down, what she had spent 2 years signing. Not numbers, not optics. Emmy, a girl with a weather station, sent home in a borrowed shirt. Yuna had branded me for making her look small. Now a child she had never met was showing the city what she had become, and there was not one word of it she could argue with. Daichi opened with the language, because it is the only language they have. Robust programmatic outcomes, stakeholder-centered youth engagement frameworks, ongoing commitment to synergized impact. For about 10 minutes it worked, as that language always works, by being too smooth to get a hand around. Adults nodded, the words went by like weather. And then a 14-year-old raised her hand and everything changed because she had not learned yet that you are supposed to let the weather pass. It was Emmy. Emmy came back for this, with her weather station in her lap and her mother beside her, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I did not have a name for. "Excuse me?" Emmy said. "You keep saying impact. Can you just tell us how many kids were actually in the Ioba Center last year? Like, a number of real kids. Who went there?" Daichi smiled and reached for the report. 400 served, he said. "It is in the annual filing." "I know it says that," Emmy said. "I am asking if it is true, because I have a picture." And she stood up, and she turned her phone around, and she held it over her head, so the whole room and the whole live stream could see it. A photo she had taken herself, a year ago, of the inside of the celebrated Aoba Innovation Center. An empty room, wrapped chairs, a banner about tomorrow. Not one child in it, but the one holding the camera, brought in for an afternoon and sent home before dinner. "This is the 400, Emmy said, her voice shaking and holding. This is me. They put us in shirts, took the pictures, and took the shirts back at the door. I asked when the real classes started. A guard told me soon. That was 14 months ago, she said. I am still waiting for soon. Somewhere in this story, a guard named Toma had told a boy the same word, and I thought of him and of how many kids had been handed that one small lie by people who never knew they were carrying it. The room did not gasp. It went quiet, which is heavier. In the quiet, a woman 2 rows back began to cry, and she was not a teenager. She was a parent who had believed a report. The live stream number jumped, and then jumped again, and a producer somewhere in the city clipped the last 30 seconds, and it began to travel on its own, past anyone's ability to reframe it. Daichi tried to recover. He reached for cohort language, for phased rollout language, and Sora stood up beside Emmy with a single sheet of paper. I made a timeline, Sora said. It is not fancy. It is what you promised on the left and what you did on the right. He read it out, plain and slow, the deadliest possible pace. Spring, you announced the Ioba Center serving 400 youth. That summer, the equipment is listed as delivered. We have a photo of the boxes, still taped shut. 8 months later. Fall. A report says the classes are thriving. Our coach quit that fall rather than sign it. Her name is Miki Nagase, Sora said. You have spent this week calling her unstable. She is the only adult in this whole story who told the truth on time. He looked up. So which report is the lie? The one with our faces in it or the one with the empty room? Daichi had no answer because there is no answer to a receipt. He tried anyway, saying something about the complexity of multi-year impact measurement. A teenager in the 3rd row said, not unkindly, that is a lot of words for no, and the room laughed out loud, which is the sound a lie makes going down the stairs. He looked to the 3rd row, to Shun, for a line to feed him, and no line came, not one, because you cannot coach a man out of a photograph a child took of your own empty building. And Shun made his one mistake of the day, small and human and fatal. He stood up to leave, a half-second of pure instinct, a man removing himself from a room that had turned. The camera caught it, the strategist walking out of the children's questions. He sat back down at once. But the internet does not forgive a man who flinched. And by evening, the clip of Shun Kuroda rising to leave a hall of kids asking where their programs went had more views than the entire forum. I stood in the back and I did not move and I did not speak. This was the thing I had spent the whole long year learning. The most powerful thing available to me was building the stage and then getting off it, so the people who were wronged could say the true thing in their own voices, with their own faces, holding their own photographs. It was not my revenge, and that is why it landed. A grown man exposing a fraud is a grudge. A child holding up a picture of the empty room they were promised is a verdict. For 7 years, I had been the man who fixed everything for Yuna without a word of credit and got a punchline for it. The old me would have wanted this to be my moment, my vindication, my microphone. Instead, I handed the microphone to Emmy and stood in the dark holding a cable, and it was worth more than any revenge I had ever imagined delivering, because it was true and it was not about me. The public did not shift because of proof from an auditor or a bombshell from a consultant. It shifted because a 14-year-old asked for a number and got a lie, and then showed everyone the number was a photograph of nothing. By Sunday, the story had flipped completely. The gold digger frame did not merely fail. It reversed and ran back over the men who built it. You cannot call a man a manipulator using children when the children are on camera, unscripted, wiping their own tears, reading their own timelines, and refusing every adult who tried to hand them a line. Meridian went silent. You cannot spin a receipt. The smear machine that had beaten me twice swung at something with no reputation to ruin and no ambition to expose, and it hit nothing but air. Back at the warehouse that night, the kids let themselves believe it. Somebody ordered too much pizza, the good kind, and Haruto put music on. For an hour, a concrete room full of teenagers who had told the truth to 100,000 strangers got to be teenagers again. Emmy taught a younger kid to solder. Sora fell asleep in a folding chair, mid-victory, which is how anybody crashes after being brave past their own capacity. I watched from the back and did not fix a single thing, and it was the best night of the whole terrible year. The board of Takamori Group could no longer look away, because looking away was now a thing that happened on a live stream with 100,000 witnesses. A fraud is a rumor until children hold up the empty room. Then it is a fact, and facts demand a response, and a response demands a name. Kaori told me the board met in emergency session that Sunday night. and the question on the table was no longer, how do we manage this? It was who signed it. And every finger in that room, following the only paper trail anyone had been shown, pointed at the same face. The vice president of the Future Foundation, Reika's daughter, the signature on the empty rooms. The cost was real, and I want to name it because these kids paid it. Emmy's face was everywhere now, and not everyone was kind. There were comments. There were people who said she was coached, that Sora was a puppet, that the whole thing was staged by the vengeful boyfriend in the back. I watched a girl, not yet 15, read those comments, set her phone face down, and keep going anyway. And I have never respected a person more. They took the backlash on the chin, personally and unfairly, which is the only way the truth ever lets you take it, and they did not stop. And Yuna, watching alone, was wounded in a way no smear had ever managed, because her name was on every one of those centers. She was the vice president of the Future Foundation, the face of the money, the signature on the empty rooms. To the whole city watching, the villain of that forum was not the man in the third row who stood up to leave. It was the charming heir whose signature funded a photograph of nothing. She was being convicted in public for a crime whose architect sat 2 seats from her at dinner every night, and she could not say one word in her own defense without confessing she had helped build it. Shun's plan was running to the letter, on schedule, with the whole city watching. She had spent the whole story terrified of disappointing her mother. Now she got to watch a city decide she was a woman who stole futures from children. And the cruelest part was that they were not entirely wrong. The crueler part was that they had no idea how right the real story was, or who had really done it, or that the woman they were burning had discovered, too late, that she was the kindling all along. That night my phone rang, and it was Reika, and her voice had the particular calm she uses right before she does something that cannot be undone. "It is public now," she said. "I can no longer pretend I am protecting an investigation by staying silent. There is nothing left to protect. There is only what happens next, and who it happens to." "What will you do?" I asked, though I half knew already, because I have learned her rhythms. "The one thing left to me that is neither the CEO nor the recusal," Reika said. "I intend to be her mother, out loud once, before the board and the law take that choice away from all of us. I am calling my family to dinner," she said. "Yuna, Shun, me, one table. I gave her a door months ago, and she would not walk through it. So I stopped waiting on the far side of it and go stand in the doorway myself," she said. "And I put one simple question to my daughter, to her face, in front of the man I believe built this." "Which question?" I asked, and braced, because her quiet questions are the ones that end things. "Whether she wants to be saved," Reika said, "or whether she has decided to go down protecting the man who is planning to bury her. I need to know which daughter I still have. And I need to ask before Saturday, because that is the day he marries her," she said. "After that, God help us all. They protect each other by law, and the door I have held open for a year swings shut for good." Reika asked me to come to the dinner, and I said no, and it was one of the hardest kind words I have ever spoken. "You should be there," she said. "You read him better than anyone alive. You could tell me what that table is doing under the tablecloth." She was not wrong. The old me would have been in that room in a heartbeat, managing it, steering it, fixing it. "Which is the reason I cannot come," I told her. "If I am at that table, it becomes about me." Yuna spends the whole night defending herself against the man who took her mother, and never once looks at her mother. "You need her to face you, not me," I said. "This is the one room in the world I make worse by walking into. Some things you have to do without a fixer in the corner, or they do not count." Reika was quiet a moment. "When did you become wise?" "I liked you better when you were merely useful." "I did not become wise," I said. "I became expensive. There is a difference, and you taught me both." So I stayed home the night the Takamori family sat down to its last real dinner. I got it later, in pieces, from Kaori, who catered it, from Reika, who lived it, and from Yuna at the very end, when she had nothing left to protect by lying. Kaori ran the evening like a summit, because that is what it was. She chose the food herself. Small plates, nothing that needed a knife, because she did not want anyone holding a blade during that conversation. "I served the courses slowly," she told me later. A confession needs time between the plates. You cannot rush a person toward the worst true thing they have ever said. So I gave them silences, she said, disguised as soup. It is the closest Kaori Shibata has ever come to poetry, and she said it while reconciling an invoice. Shun got to Yuna before the dinner. Of course he did. He always got there first. He found her while she was dressing, and he did the thing he does, which is love-shaped and made of knives. He straightened her collar. He told her how strong she was. Then, gently, he reminded her of the shape of the trap, without ever once calling it one. Your mother will ask you to confess tonight, he said. She means well. She always means well. But think, my love, if you confess for both of us, because your name is on all of it, and the prenuptial ties us together now. You take us both down, and you take the company with us, he went on, smoothing her sleeve. Your mother spends her last years watching everything she built get sold for parts, because her daughter needed to feel clean for one dinner. Is that love? He asked. Or is that the most selfish thing a frightened girl could do? He let the question do its work, because he had taught her to hear her own fear in his voice. And if it ever does come apart, he added, the knife fully out now. Remember, there is already a version written down in which none of this was ever your doing at all. A version where a decent man was manipulated by a consultant who wanted her mother's company, he said. That version protects you, but only if you stay quiet and stay beside me. He kissed her forehead. So go. Have dinner with your mother. Tell her you love her. And say nothing you cannot take back. Then he walked her in himself, because Shun had no intention of leaving her alone in a room with the only human being who could still reach her. He came to the dinner. He sat at the table. He was, by every account, perfect. He complimented the food. He toasted Reika's health. He told a warm story about the wedding plans and squeezed Yuna's hand on precisely the right beats, a man performing devotion for an audience of one woman who had learned too late to read him. Reika watched him operate and understood, with total clarity, that she was looking at the architect. No proof anywhere in it, only the certainty a mother earns the hard way. Every time Yuna moved toward honesty, Shun's thumb moved on the back of her hand, and Yuna went smooth again. So Kaori did the one thing left to do, and she did it with a serving spoon. Midway through the second course, she leaned to Shun's ear and murmured that there was an urgent call waiting for him in the study, from a name he could not ignore. There was no call. There was only Kaori Shibata deciding that a mother deserved 15 minutes alone with her daughter and manufacturing them out of thin air and pure nerve. Shun hesitated, read the room, and could not refuse an urgent call without looking like a man afraid to leave the table. He excused himself. Kaori met my eyes across the memory of it later and said only, I have arranged difficult logistics my entire career. That was the finest 15 minutes I ever stole. The dinner in that window was unbearably gentle. That is what undid everyone. There was no shouting. There was a mother and a daughter and 40 years of things they had never said. There was Kari's slow, beautiful food and the wedding 2 days away, like a train they could all hear coming down the line. For a long time they talked about nothing. The flowers for Saturday, an aunt who was flying in, a summer house from when Yuna was small. Reika let her daughter hide in the small talk. Because you do not corner a frightened animal. You leave the cage door open and you wait. Do you remember the summer the power went out for a week? Reika asked. You were 7. You were terrified of the dark, and I was terrified of losing a merger. And we ended up reading by candles because neither of us could sleep. You said the dark was fine as long as someone was awake in it with you, Reika said. I have thought about that sentence for 20 years. I was so rarely the one awake in it with you. I was always downstairs on the phone. Yuna's eyes filled, and she looked down at her plate, and for a moment the whole performance she had worn for 2 years slipped an inch. Then, over the third course, Reika set down her fork and stopped waiting. I am not performing the CEO tonight, she said. I recused her months ago. Tonight I am only your mother. One question, and I will believe whatever answer you give me, she said, because I have spent your whole life not believing you, and it is the great failure of my life. Yuna went very still, the stillness of someone who has just heard a lock she thought was solid begin to turn. I know you did not build this alone, Reika said. I have known for a long time. I do not think my daughter woke up one morning and invented a way to steal from children. I think someone taught you and stood behind you, she went on. I think you are more frightened than guilty, and I think I can still help you if you let me. So, did you build this alone? And here is the moment the whole story had been walking toward. Kaori was in the doorway with the fourth course, and she stopped because she felt the air in the room change. Reika said Yuna's mouth opened. Yuna told me, much later, that it was the closest she ever came. The word no was already in her throat. She could feel the whole true story rising up behind it, Shun and the shells and the sealed folder and all of it, ready to come out and set her loose. She looked across the table at a mother who had never in 40 years offered to catch her and was offering now. And then she heard Shun's voice, the one that lived inside her now. You confess for both of us. You take the company with you. There is already a version where none of it was ever your doing, but only if you stay quiet. I built it alone, Yuna said. The words came out flat and final, and they cost her everything. Reika watched her daughter choose the cage with the door standing wide open, and something in the mother's face went clear and still. No, you did not, Reika said softly. But I see that you will keep saying it, and I understand why. You are more afraid of him than you are of prison, she said. And that is the thing I cannot fix by being your mother, because a mother is the first thing he taught you to sacrifice. Mom, Yuna said, and the word cracked down the middle, and for 1 second she was 7 again, and the power was out. I gave you a door a long time ago, Reika said. I have held it open through every awful month of this. I am closing it tonight. Not because I stopped loving you, she said, but because you have taught me that holding it open is one more way of refusing to respect what you decided. You are a grown woman. You have chosen him, and chosen silence, and chosen the cage, Reika said. So I do the hardest thing a mother can do. I let you live inside the thing you chose. I will not lie for you. I will not shield you, she said. And I will not stop loving you, which is the part that will destroy me. Yuna was crying now, openly, the polish gone. You do not understand. If I talk, it is not only me, it is you, everything you built. I would burn everything I built to have a daughter who was free, Reika said. And it was the truest thing she ever said. And it was too late, and they both knew it. That you cannot believe that is his greatest work, she said. He taught you that my company matters to me more than you do. He was wrong. He was always wrong. Yuna could not answer. She had married the wrongness, and it was signed and sealed and dated for Saturday. Shun came back from his imaginary call then, sat down, and read the room in half a second, which is his one genuine talent. He saw the tears, the closed door, the mother's terrible calm. He saw that he had won again, from a study down the hall, without saying a word. Everything all right? He asked, warm as a lamp, and reached for Yuna's hand. And Yuna, who had chosen him over her own freedom 10 minutes earlier, let him take it because there was nothing left to protect by pulling it away. Kaori set down the 4th course that nobody would eat, and cleared the 3rd without a sound. She told me later it was the only dinner of her career where she wished she had cooked worse food, so there would have been less silence to fill. Reika came to me that night and did not cry, and that told me how deep it went. She sat at my kitchen counter, the one honest table left in her life. I lost her, she said. Not tonight, years ago. Tonight I only read the date printed on it. You did not lose her, I said. You stopped carrying her. Those look the same from the inside, and they are not the same thing at all. She marries him on Saturday, Reika said, and there is nothing I am allowed to do about it. There is one thing, I said. You can stop being the reason she stays quiet. She has spent her whole life afraid the truth would cost her your love, I said. Take that fear off the table. Tell her the truth cannot cost her that, ever, no matter what she has done. Then the only thing keeping her silent is him, standing there with nothing in front of him, and she will have to look straight at it. Reika considered it a long time. That is either very wise or very cruel. It is both, I said. You taught me that too. She sent Yuna one message that night, and only one. It said, whatever you did, and whoever helped you do it, you will not lose me by telling the truth. That is the one thing he can never take. She did not sign it. She did not need to. Yuna read it in the passenger seat of Shun's car, on the way home to a wedding she did not want. She did not answer, but she did not delete it either. She saved it and read it again at a red light, and something in her that Shun had spent 2 years sanding down started, without any noise at all, to grow back. He noticed she was quiet. He asked if the dinner had been hard. She wanted to say goodbye to the single life. That is all, Yuna told him, and smiled, and it was the second best performance of her life. Inside, she was holding her mother's message like a coal and beginning to plan. As for me, I spent that whole evening doing the hardest thing a recovering fixer can do, nothing. I sat in my apartment while people I loved suffered across the city, and I did not drive over, and I did not call, and I did not fix. I trusted Reika to do her own hard thing, and I let the silence be hers instead of stealing it to soothe myself. It was the loneliest useful night of my life. What none of us knew, while a mother grieved a living daughter over cold soup, was that Shun had already stopped playing defense. He had watched the forum flip the public against him. He had felt his own flinch go viral. He had sat at that bar while his fiancée had dinner with the woman who could still turn her. And he had decided he could no longer afford to merely survive. He needed to win, publicly and permanently, in a way that ended the whole story on his own terms. Shun did not think small. He thought in stages, and the biggest stage Takamori owned was 2 weeks away. The annual Successor Forum. Investors, board, press, every camera in the country. The event where the next leader of Takamori Group is presented to the future. The room where Yuna was supposed to be crowned. Shun decided to use it for something better than a coronation. He would stand on that stage in front of the whole city, and he would not defend the fraud. He would give it an author, and the author would not be Yuna, and it would certainly not be him. It would be me, the gold digger, the consultant who wormed his way into the CEO's bed and her company, the man who invented a fraud narrative to seize control, who used a lonely woman and a basement of children as his props. The whole thing, my masterpiece, my crime. He had a confession pre-written in Yuna's voice, a sealed folder, and 2 years of her signatures. Now he set about building the matching case against me, one careful piece at a time. On the biggest stage in the company, he would hand the board the villain they were desperate for, and the villain would wear my face, and the applause would be for him. He started that same week. Meridian seeded a new story to a few trusted reporters. The deep version this time, planted low where it would take root, not gold digger, mastermind. The consultant who had engineered the whole scandal, coached the children, seduced the CEO, and stood to inherit an empire once the daughter was disgraced. He even requested my old consulting file from the archive, the contract I had ended, and the fee I had returned. And I would learn later he had a plan to make even my honesty look like a cover. A man who returns a fee, told correctly, becomes a man building an alibi. Shun meant to turn every clean thing I had ever done into evidence of a longer con. I learned he was moving because Kari called me at midnight with 4 words, in the flat voice she keeps for fires already burning. He is coming for you. And for once, I was not afraid, because I had learned the one thing that beats a man like Shun. What I did not know yet was the price of using it, which was a choice on that stage between saving myself and keeping the one promise that made me worth saving. The wedding did not happen that Saturday. You cannot marry the disgraced face of a public fraud in a white tent while the city is still watching the live stream. The board asked them to wait for optics until the succession question was settled. Shun agreed instantly because a postponed wedding was nothing to him. He had a bigger ceremony in mind. The annual Successor Forum, the room where Takamori Group presents its future to the world. Every year, the company fills its grandest hall with investors, board members, and press, and unveils the next generation of leadership. This year, it was supposed to crown Yuna. Instead, Shun turned it into a trial, and he made sure I was the defendant. Here is the part that should have warned me. 3 days before the forum, my barring was lifted. The resolution that had kept me off Takamori property for months was reversed without announcement, and a formal invitation arrived asking me to attend the forum as an interested party. I understood it at once. Shun did not want me on the sidewalk anymore. You cannot burn a man in effigy. You need him in the room, in a good suit, where the cameras can watch his face fall. He was not letting me in. He was setting a place for me at my own execution. "Do not go," Sayaka said. "It is a trap with your name embroidered on the napkin." "Which is the reason I have to walk into it," I said. "If I hide, I prove I am hiding something. He has built a stage where my absence is a confession and my presence is a target. There is no third door." "There is one," Sayaka said, low, and slid a folder across the table. The folder, everything she had. The laundry, the shells, the annex receipts that pointed at Shun's own hand. 2 years of proof that the architecture was his. "You walk in there and you drop this on the podium, and you bury him in front of the whole world," she said. "It is clean, it is legal, it is true, and it is yours to use." She was not testing me. She was offering me a lifeline because she is my friend, and she did not want to watch me drown to prove a point. I sat with that folder open in front of me. It would save me. It would end Shun. It would also drag Mickey back onto every front page as the witness at the center of it, reopen the wound on the Hikari kids, and make the whole thing, once again, the Ren Aizawa show. My bombshell, my rescue, my reflex. You know what is in that folder better than I do, I said. Say the cost out loud, so I cannot pretend I did not hear it. Sayaka is an auditor. She does not look away from a ledger. It only stands up because Mickey authenticates it. Her name is the source line under the laundry trail, the annex receipts, the core path transfers. Hand it up in that hall, and the first thing 400 people ask is who gave it to you, she said. The answer is a coordinator they already blacklisted once for telling the truth. You put her back on every front page yourself. And the receipts carry addresses, I said. Delivery points, vendor drops. Half of them are the rooms where the Hikari kids meet, because that is where the real program has been running all along, out of sight, on purpose. I would be reading their locations into a live microphone, to the same men who cut their funding the last time they surfaced. I would hand Shun the map and call it a rescue. So the bundle is real, and it would stand up in any court, Sayaka said. And the second it goes public, it stops being evidence and becomes a map. To Mickey, to the teenagers, to every door they walk through. She did not soften a word of it, which is why I keep her close. I am not telling you that you are wrong to want it. I am telling you the price and the names of the people whose account it comes out of. No, I said, and I heard how far I had come in the size of that word. If I win that way, I win by spending Mickey again. I promised her the proof waits until people are safe. She is barely safe. The kids are barely safe. I am not lighting them on fire to keep myself warm. He will destroy you, Sayaka said. I know, I said, so I do the one thing he cannot plan around. I walk in there with no weapon at all. I refuse to be the villain. I refuse to hand him a different villain. And I put the one question he cannot answer down in the middle of that room, I said. Then comes the hardest part. The part I have failed at my whole life. I let go of the ending. Sayaka stared at me. You have gotten so much more annoying since you developed principles. I liked you better when all you wanted was to win. But she closed the folder and she came with me because that is what she does. The forum hall was enormous, tiered like a theater, a stage at the bottom washed in light. 400 of the most important people in the city, a wall of press, cameras streaming to everyone who was not there. Haruto could not get in, so he did the next best thing. He set up outside with the coalition, the teens, Mickey, a dozen volunteers, ready, he said, for whatever the night needed. We are not here to storm anything, he told me on the phone before I went in. We are here so that whatever happens in there, you walk out to people who already know the truth. You are not doing this alone tonight, even if you are the only one in the room, he said. Remember that when it gets bad, and it will get bad. He was right, as he is always right about rooms, and it got bad on schedule. I took my seat as an interested party, alone in a row, and felt 400 people decide they already knew who I was. Reika sat with the board, close enough to see me, forbidden by her recusal from crossing the room. Kaori was 2 seats down from her, taking minutes, her face a locked door. Yuna sat near the front with Shun, pale under the lights, a bride with no wedding, and a trial whose verdict she did not know. She did not look at me. She looked at her own hands, the ones that had signed everything, and I wondered what her mother's unsigned message was doing inside her. Shun took the stage like a man accepting an award. He did not look nervous. Why would he? He had written every word, and he thought he had written mine too. He began with grief. That was the genius of it. He did not attack, he mourned. We have all been deceived, he told the room, gentle and grave. For months, this company has been tearing itself apart over a fraud. Tonight, painful as it is, I will tell you who built it and why. And then, slowly, warmly, with the confidence of a man holding a room in his palm, he told my story, not the true one. The masterpiece. A rootless consultant, he said, nobody, with a talent for reading powerful people. Rejected by the vice president, he found a wounded, lonely CEO and made himself indispensable to her. He invented a fraud or wildly inflated a small accounting mess to make himself the hero who discovered it. He seduced his way into the CEO's confidence and her home. He coached vulnerable children to perform a scandal on live stream. He drove a wedge through a family, disgraced the rightful heir, and positioned himself through the CEO's affections to inherit influence over an empire he could never have earned. He returned his consulting fee, Shun said, and produced my old contract like a magician so that no one could say he was paid. A man who refuses money is not always honest. Sometimes he is simply playing a longer game for a larger prize than a fee, he said, and let the room admire the logic. Everything this man did that looked like integrity was the most patient confidence trick this company has ever seen. I watched it land. That is the thing I have to be honest about. It landed. You could feel the room turn, row by row, like a tide going out. People who had pitied me now looked at me with the specific disgust reserved for a manipulator unmasked. A board member shook his head. A reporter wrote fast. Someone behind me whispered the word predator, and it was about me. It was the darkest low of the whole story, and I had walked into it on purpose, with no weapon. And for one long moment, I could not remember why that had seemed brave instead of suicidal. A reporter in the second row turned in her seat to get my face on camera, the face of the unmasked manipulator, and I made myself hold still and let her take it. A photograph is a mood, not a fact. I had learned that the hard way from a rainy Wednesday and a folder of receipts. Tonight, I would have to trust the room to learn it too. Reika's hands were white in her lap. She could not speak. To defend me was to prove she was compromised, which would confirm every word Shun had just said and destroy the last shred of the investigation. Her silence was the loudest agony in the room, and Shun had engineered her into it months ago, on purpose, with a resolution. He had done more than frame me. He had built a trap in which the woman who loved me had to sit still and watch it close. Beside me, Sayaka murmured, without moving her lips, "For the record, my professional assessment is that we are losing." "I know," I whispered back. "Stay in your seat. Trust me." "Those are the two sentences you say right before everything explodes," she said, and stayed in her seat. Then, after a moment, "The folder is in my bag. Say the word," and I handed up. One word, Ren, the lifeline, offered one last time. I looked at the folder in her bag. I looked at Mickey's face on my phone, texting from the sidewalk. "Still with you." I looked at Reika, silenced. I looked at Yuna, pale and trapped near the front, and I stood up. "You are allowed to address the forum as the accused." I had checked. It was the one procedural door Shun's own theater had to leave open, because a trial with no defense is just a lynching with a program, and he needed it to look like justice. I walked down to the stage, and 400 people watched the villain approach the light, and I felt every single one of them waiting for me to do what cornered men do: rage, deny, attack, produce my own bombshell, fight. I did not fight. "Most of what he said is true," I said, and the room went very still, because that is not what a guilty man says. "I am rootless. I did make myself indispensable to powerful people. For 7 years, I fixed everything for Yuna Takamori for free and got a punchline for it. And yes, I was the kind of man who needed to be needed so badly, I called it love." He read me correctly. That part is not a lie. I did fall in love with Reika Takamori, and I am not ashamed of it. And I did return my fee before I did, in that order, on purpose. You can decide for yourselves whether that was a con or a conscience. Nobody can prove the inside of his own heart to a room of 400, and I will not waste your evening trying. "But here is the one thing his beautiful story cannot survive," I said. "It requires the fraud to be fake. It requires the empty rooms to be a trick I invented. So I will not be showing you a folder tonight. You have already seen the folder. You toured it yourselves. This board sent a delegation a few weeks ago to a center it chose at random. You found it staffed and furnished and alive. Ask the man who volunteered to open it for you that day how a working center gets built in 6 days and vanishes the moment your elevator doors close," I said. "Ask him where the furniture went. He rented it. There are receipts. Your own auditor has them. You do not need me for any of this." A 14-year-old girl held up a photograph of an empty room you paid $400,000 to fill, I said. I did not coach her. I could not have. "I was barred from this building the entire time by a resolution this man wrote. I have had no access to anything," I said. "He made sure of that himself. And now he needs you to believe I ran everything from the sidewalk he put me on." The tide paused. I could feel it. Not turned, not yet. Paused, the way a room pauses when 2 stories stand next to each other and only one of them has receipts. A board member, the same lead director who had picked the annex at random, leaned forward and said, quietly into the microphone in front of him, "The furniture question is a fair one." It was 4 words, but it was the first crack, and Shun heard it, and something moved in his jaw that had not moved all night. "I could stand here and name the architect," I said. "I have the proof. I will not be using it tonight, and I want to tell you why. Because the reason is the only thing left in this building that belongs to me. Because the last time I was cornered, I used a person to save myself. A good woman with a small program. I put her name in the light to clear mine. Men in nice suits burned her for it and shut down a whole room of real kids to punish her for my impatience, I said. I promised her I would never do that again, not to win, not even to survive. So I do not win this using his methods. I do not spend anybody, I said. One person in this room knows for certain who built this fraud and who only signed it, who taught and who was taught. It is not me. I was never inside it, I said. It is not the auditor. It is not a folder. It is a person. And she has sat silent through this entire performance while two men take turns telling her story for her. I turned and I did not point because pointing is accusing, and I was done accusing people to save myself. I looked at her, and that was all. Yuna, I said gently, the way you say a name you have carried for 7 years. You know, you have always known. Everything this room believes I did to you, somebody really did do to you, and it was not me. You are the only person alive who can tell 400 people which story is true. I will not tell it for you, and I will not trade you to save myself, which is what he is doing right now, tonight, while he holds your hand, I said. So I stop talking, and I sit down, and I leave the truth where it has lived this whole time, with you. And I walk back to my seat, with no bombshell dropped and no person spent, and I sat down next to Sayaka, who let out a breath and whispered, "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I have ever sat through, and I genuinely cannot tell which." Neither could I. I had handed my entire life to the woman who spent 7 years treating it as worthless, and there was nothing left to do but sit there and watch. Shun moved fast to close it. "This is the manipulation I described, performed live for you," he said smoothly, reaching for Yuna, putting my fiancée on the spot, using her the same as he used everyone. "Yuna, my love, you do not have to answer this man. Come, tell them the truth. Tell them what he did to you." He held out his hand to her on the stage, in front of the world, and he smiled the warm smile that had run her life for 2 years. All she had to do was take it, stand at the podium, and repeat the lie. Then I was finished, and she was safe, and the wedding was back on, and the empire was theirs. 400 people, a wall of cameras, her mother's silence, my life, and her whole future all came down to one woman deciding whether to take one outstretched hand. Yuna stood up. For a moment she did nothing else, caught between the man holding out his hand and the man who had refused to point at her, and you could watch 2 years of fear and one unsigned message fight for the same square foot of stage. She looked at Shun's hand, the one that had run her life. She looked at me, and I gave her nothing, no plea, no instruction, because the whole point was that it had to be hers. She turned to her mother, who could not say a word, but who had already said the only one that mattered, and never signed it. Then Yuna walked past Shun's outstretched hand and up to the podium and put her own hands on either side of it, and the whole world leaned in to hear which story came out of her mouth. Yuna stood at the podium with her hands on either side of it, and she did not speak, and 400 people let her not speak. Shun could not allow the quiet, because quiet was the one thing his whole night had built no plan around. "Take your time," he said, warm, in the voice that had run her life for 2 years. "We all know how hard this man has made it," he added, "for you to stand up and say one simple, honest thing." Behind her, on his cue, the tall screen woke. Meridian had built her a coronation film, and it began where all these films begin, with her face in soft light over a rising score. I knew that film before it played. I had watched its ancestor be born on a borrowed laptop by a loading dock. 2 minutes of pretty light with not one living child inside it. On the podium glass, pale text began to scroll. They had written her statement for her. She had only to let the words climb in front of her and read them in her own voice, and I was finished. Shun had thought of everything a man can think of. A script, a screen, a swelling score, a hall already primed to grieve for her. He had left her nothing to do but perform. That was the flaw in it, though I would not see the flaw for another minute. He had built a machine that ran on her obedience and never asked if it could run without one person inside it who cared. Sayaka leaned an inch toward me. "He rehearsed her," she said under her breath. "Look at the glass. He wrote her lines, and now he is watching her read them back to him." "She has not read one word yet," I said, and it was true. Yuna's eyes were on the moving text. Her mouth stayed shut. The scroll kept climbing, and no voice climbed with it. Then the screen died. There was nothing dramatic about how it went, and that is the part nobody in that business ever thinks to plan for. Her glowing face froze, stuttered once, and dropped into a flat panel of error blue. The score cut to a hard silence. On the podium glass, the words she was meant to read stopped and went black. A technician's voice came over a hot mic from the booth, far too loud in the new quiet. "It is frozen. Both machines are frozen. Give me 1 second." Then that mic cut too, and there was nothing. Somewhere above the lights, two people were doing what I once did in a rented tuxedo, rebuilding an evening from raw parts, while important people drummed their fingers and waited. The difference was simple. Nobody in this hall loved the event enough to save it well, because the man who used to love it that much was on trial in the gallery. Shun turned toward the booth and made a small, automatic gesture I have made 1,000 times myself. The snap. The half turn of the head that says, "Fix this now, you, whoever you are." There was no one left to snap for. The man who used to answer that snap sat in the gallery in a good suit, barred from the building by Shun's own resolution in the seat Shun had built for him. "For the record," Sayaka murmured, barely moving her lips, "their coronation lost a fight with a laptop, and it cost more than my apartment. I will enjoy writing that sentence into a report." Shun's eyes came off the booth and found me, and for one breath, he wanted the failure to be mine. You could watch him reach for the cleaner story, the one where the villain also cuts the power. "Perhaps," he said to the hall, recovering his gloss, "we should ask our guest upstairs if he knows anything about a convenient malfunction. Rescuing broken evenings has always been his signature." I stood, because a question thrown at you before 400 people deserves an answer given on your feet. I have sat in this chair since the doors opened, in plain sight of this entire section. I have been barred from this building for months by a resolution you drafted yourself. I could not get within 3 floors of that booth if I wanted to, and tonight I did not want to. "So pick one," I said. "Either I am a ghost who runs everything from a sidewalk, or I am a man you locked out of the building. I cannot be both," and you signed the page that decides which. The hall had heard the question, and a question, once heard, does not unask itself. The reporter, 2 rows down, turned back from photographing the villain and wrote it into her notes instead. The screen stayed dead. The podium glass stayed black. Yuna Takamori stood before the most important people in her mother's world, with nothing at all scrolling in front of her for once. I think that is what did it. Not the speeches, not her mother, not some private swell of courage. The prompter died, and she had to learn what her own voice would do inside an open silence. "Yuna." Shun stepped toward her, quieter now, the urgency showing under the calm, like bone under skin. He raised a hand near her arm, not touching it, angled for the cameras. "The equipment failed," he said. "It changes nothing. You know what you came to say. Say it and we go home. And every part of this is behind us for good." She looked at his hand. She had looked at it once already tonight, across the stage, and walked past it. Now it was back, patient, certain she would take it in the end, because she always had. Then she looked at me, and I gave her nothing. No nod, no plea, no small lift of the chin. I had promised myself she would choose alone, because coaxing her had been my whole disease for 7 years. And she found her mother in the tears. Reika sat with the board, hands folded, barred by her own recusal from sending her daughter one word. But a word was already sent, unsigned, and Yuna had saved it. "They wrote me a statement," Yuna said. Her voice came thin, then found a floor under itself. It was on the glass. "It is a good statement. I read it 4 times today. It is very kind to me." The hall went quiet in a different key than before. The hush people fall into when they sense something genuine about to happen to someone who has only ever been polished. "It says, I was deceived by Ren Aizawa," she said, "that he built all of this and used me and broke my family, that none of it was mine. I read it, I keep everything, and I never have to be brave." She looked at the dead blue screen, "And I cannot find it anywhere now. I think that frozen laptop is the only piece of luck I have had in 2 years." "Yuna," Shun said, the warmth in it thinning and cooling at the edges. "You are exhausted. You are not well. Do not do this to yourself in front of these people. Let me take you out of here." "I built the first lie," she said, straight over him to the hall. "Not him, me. 3 years ago, the Ioba Center was behind schedule. And there was one thing in this entire world I was afraid of. I was afraid of my mother learning I could not do the job she handed me. So I hung a banner, brought real children in for one afternoon, and let a camera turn them into a future that never existed. That part was mine, she said, and I did it alone before he came anywhere near it. And I have never said that sentence out loud until right now, in this room, to all of you. I had waited years to hear her say a true thing about herself. And it was harder to watch than I expected, because for once, she was not performing it. She was setting it down where its weight could be seen. Then it grew too large to take back, she said. And a man offered to make it disappear. He did not make it disappear, he made it enormous. The shell contractors, the second center that was never built, reports that praised empty rooms, money that left in a circle and came back clean. I signed whatever he set down in front of me. The kind reports went to Meridian and came back as gospel, she said. My mother read them. I let her be proud of a building with nothing inside it. That is the piece I can never hand back. Shun moved fast, the way you move when the floor tilts under you. This is a breakdown, not a confession, he told the board, snatching at the last authority within his reach, and her own hand contradicts her. 3 weeks ago, Una signed a full statement, freely, taking sole responsibility and confirming she acted with no help. I have it. Her counsel holds a copy. She reverses herself now only because this man has gotten to her at last. He reached into his own jacket and produced it. A folded document, held up over his head like a torch. And I felt the whole night turn on the one thing he was most certain would save his life. You have a signed confession, the lead director said slowly. He was the same man who had chosen the empty annex at random, toured it himself, and found nothing alive inside. Dated 3 weeks ago. Before this board ever sat down on the succession at all, you prepared a paper laying every crime at your own fiancé's feet, and you have carried it folded in your coat. Shun heard it about a half second after he had already handed it to us. Too late to catch the glass, he had knocked toward the edge of the table. You wrote it, Eunice said, and now she did look at him. You brought it to my dressing room. You told me what confessing would cost me and what silence would buy me, and you put the pen in my hand. You dated it for a day I never chose. You built a version of me who takes the fall, weeks before you needed her, and you kept her folded against your chest, waiting for a night that looked like this one. Kaori Shibata spoke without being asked, which in all these years I had never seen her do. Her voice was as flat and final as a ledger closing on a bad quarter. For the record, these minutes will keep. No statement under Miss Takamori's name has ever been filed with the corporate secretary or with the investigation, she said. Whatever the director of strategy is holding was drafted inside his own office. It has no standing in this hall. I would know. I keep the record, and his paper is not in it. Shun tried once more, because a man like him always keeps one more. This is the manipulation I warned you about. The CEO herself is compromised. Her judgment cannot be trusted while she shares a bed with the accused. An hour earlier, that sentence would have cut. Now it dropped into the hall and died on the floor because the accused had just refused to defend himself and the CEO had not spoken a single word all night. What moved through the tears above me then was not a gasp and not applause. It was quieter and more expensive. 400 people were revising an hour of managed belief in real time, and there is no colder feeling for the powerful than the moment they learn they were handled. The lead director leaned to his microphone. The board will hear from the independent auditor. Not from Mr. Aizawa. From the auditor. Is there a documented trail? And does it match this account? Sayaka stood. I had watched this woman treat human feeling as a variance to be flagged for 2 years, and I had never once seen her choose her words as carefully as she chose them now. There is a trail, she said. It is complete, and I will hand it to this board through council tonight. It runs from the Ioba banner through 2 shells and a laundering loop and back into clean reports. The signatures and the direction of the money match Miss Takamori's account of who began this and who grew it, she said. That is what the paper shows. I am comfortable saying so under my license. Then she paused and chose the next part with real care. That same trail also holds the names and meeting places of real young people who were used as scenery and who had no part in any of this. Those names do not get read into this hall, and none of you will ask me to read them. You do not need them. You saw the proof already, with your own eyes, in a room you paid to furnish. I sat very still, because she had done in public the same thing I had refused to do an hour earlier. She held the whole folder and shielded the children inside it. And the truth still arrived. It arrived in the hands of the woman who owned it outright. I had staked everything on that being possible, and until that second, I had honestly not known that it was. Reika had not moved. She could not, and now she did not need to. Her forced silence, the cruelest thing in the hall an hour ago, had become the very thing that made the reversal clean. No one could ever say the CEO reached down to rescue her daughter or her lover. She had let the process be fair, and fair had walked in under its own power and taken the stage from both men. Shun was still holding his document. That is the picture I kept from the whole night, not his face, his hand, and the folded page in it, once his masterstroke, now the clearest proof of his plan. I was protecting this company, he said, and it came out wrong, too loud, aimed at no one at all. Every decision I made protected the value of what this family built. You laundered $400,000 through a room with a banner and called it a future, the lead director said, without heat. Do not lecture this board about value. It did not end with a verdict. Real endings rarely do. It ended with procedure, which is slower and much harder to argue with. The lead director called a recess that every person present understood was not a recess. 2 audit members asked Shun to remain in the building and to keep his counsel close at hand. The lawyer who had sat at Shun's shoulder all night squared a folder, stood, and moved 1 chair away from him. In that world, that small motion is the sound of a man being left behind. Someone from the legal office lifted the document out of Shun's hand, gently, because it was evidence now and no longer an argument. He let it go. He had run out of places left to put it. Before the recess closed, the lead director said the board would refer the full matter to outside counsel and to the regulators in the morning. That sentence is where the real consequences begin. They withdrew Yuna's nomination before she was even off the stage. There was no cruelty in it, and there was no mercy in it either. The woman who built the first lie at that flagship could not be handed the company at the opening of an investigation into that same fraud. Everyone knew it. Yuna first of all before it was said. She had told the truth, and it cost her the only thing she was ever allowed to want. That is the whole price, and I will not dress it up by claiming it bought her something better in the same breath. She passed close to me on her way up the aisle, walking out of a stage light she had lived under since she was 24. She stopped. I spent 7 years treating you like a spare key, she said. I am not doing this for you, and I expect nothing back for it. I need you to understand that part. I know, I said. You did it because the words in your mouth were yours instead of his. That is the only reason tonight counts for anything at all. She almost smiled. The ghost of the friend I used to have before either of us learned to perform for a living. Then she went to find her mother, who was not permitted to come to her. Reika had waited her whole life for Yuna to be the one who crossed the distance first. And tonight, off the stage and out of the light, her daughter crossed it on her own 2 feet. My phone buzzed against my leg. Haruto, from the sidewalk, piecing the night together off the live stream and the noise of the crowd. 3 words. Screen died. You sat there. A second message landed a breath later. Best thing you have ever not done. I am buying the whole crew around on the folding chair account tonight. I walked out with no bomb dropped and no one spent. Past cameras that suddenly wanted a very different photograph of me than the one they came for. I gave them nothing again. Outside, under a streetlight, a small crowd was waiting that already knew every word of it. Mickey, the Hikari teenagers, a dozen volunteers with cold hands, and Sora, who makes a sign for everything. This one said nothing clever. My name, spelled right, in careful marker on cardboard, held up by the 14-year-old who had filmed the whole trial from a curb. You did not use us, Mickey said. And it was not a question, because she had watched every second of it happen on the phone in Sora's cold hands. No, I said. I told you the proof would wait until you were all safe. It waited. It will keep waiting until the day it cannot hurt any of you, and that day is still not tonight. For about the length of that streetlight, I let myself believe the machine that had used me for 7 years was done with me for good. Then, a man with a board lanyard caught my sleeve before I reached my car and asked, very warmly, whether we might sit down soon and talk about my future at Takamori. The real offer would arrive the next morning. This was only the handshake. And I already knew that saying no would be harder than anything I had done inside the hall tonight. The morning after you burned down a lie, the phone does not stop ringing. For once, though, none of the calls want me to fix anything. They want to know what I want, and I had almost no practice at that particular question. Sayaka came by before the coffee was even cold, carrying a folder that for once was not a weapon pointed at anyone. She dropped into the good chair without asking and set her boots on the crate I use for a table. Update from the front, she said. Outside counsel has the whole matter now, and the regulators have it by Friday. Shun is looking at fraud charges he cannot smile his way out of, and his own lawyer has stopped taking the friendly calls. And Yuna, I said. It was the question sitting under all the other questions, so I set it on the table plainly. A subject, not a bystander, Sayaka said. She built the first lie, she signed the paper, and she confessed to the whole city on a live stream. Cooperation earns her something. It does not earn her the corner office. That door is shut, and it stays shut. And the foundation itself, I said. Does any of it survive this? Gutted and rebuilding, she said. Reika ended her recusal the moment the succession question died, walked into her own boardroom, and took the failure in public instead of hiding it behind a press release. She told them the fraud happened on her watch, and the repair would happen there too, Sayaka added. It cost her, in front of people who had never once seen her bleed. She did it anyway, and she did it on purpose. That was new for Reika, and it hit me square, as it does when someone you love turns out to have a brave thing in them you never counted on. She had spent a lifetime solving problems with authority. This time, she stood in front of one and took the hit herself. Then Sayaka set down the second thing, the real reason she had climbed my stairs before breakfast. Now for the part that should worry you. When a fraud this size goes public, frightened money does not aim carefully at anything. 3 foundations froze their youth grants this week, she said. Across the whole city, the real programs and the fake ones together, because a nervous committee cannot tell them apart in a panic and does not slow down to try. I felt the old reflex fire before my brain could catch its wrist, the urge to stand up, grab a folder, and go fix it all alone at midnight. It was the same instinct that had burned Mickey the last time I let it steer. Hikari, I said, and the name came out heavier than one word should be able to carry. Hikari is exposed again, Sayaka said. No one attacked it this time. A whole sector flinched at once, and the smallest, truest program is always the first thing a scared board cuts. Same wound as before, a duller knife. This time, I went nowhere alone, and nowhere in the dark. I called Haruto, and I called Mickey, and by noon, the coalition that had once stood shivering on a sidewalk was crowded into Haruto's cramped office instead, arguing over a whiteboard. We built a way to keep a real program breathing without begging a single nervous foundation to grow a spine. Independent donors, a neighborhood drive, money from people who had shaken the kids' hands and knew all of their names. See, this is the whole sickness of it, Haruto said, shoving folding chairs aside with one foot to clear room for more bodies. Everyone panics about the fake center that had nothing in it but a banner on the wall. Nobody panics about the real one with 30 kids and a broken heater, he said. One of those I can fix by Thursday with a borrowed van and 2 volunteers. Guess which? This city wears its fears on backward and calls it prudence. It took 9 days. 9 days of Haruto's events, Mickey's careful phone calls, and a coalition that had spent months learning how to move without anyone's permission. At the end of them, Hikari had a year of funding that no frightened committee could ever vote away, because it did not come from a committee at all. It came from the neighborhood the program had been serving all along. That was the whole difference between this time and the last time. The people came first, then the proof, then the program, and I was one pair of hands among many, instead of the entire rescue standing alone at midnight. The offer came the next morning, on heavy paper, hand-delivered, which is how that world says the word please without ever having to feel it. The board wanted me inside, a formal role, special advisor to the foundation, with a mandate to rebuild the youth programs, restore public trust, and make certain another Aoba never happened on their watch again. A real budget, a real title, a real salary, the first anyone had ever attached to the work I did for free for 7 years while being introduced around as somebody's +1. They asked me to hear it in person, in the same building that had barred me for months, in a glass conference room I had once been escorted out of by security. I went, because you should always look a temptation in the face before you tell it no. The lead director made the pitch himself, the man who had chosen the empty annex at random and later cracked Shun's whole story open with 4 honest words. He was decent about it, which only made it harder. We were wrong about you comprehensively, he said. This is us being right, with a budget attached. Take the seat. Nobody in this city could rebuild these programs faster, and you would never have to scrape for $1 again. You would report to the foundation, which in the end means to Mrs. Takamori, another member added, meaning it warmly, not hearing the trap folded inside his own sentence. You would be family here. That word did the opposite of what he intended. I had been treated like family for 7 years, right up until the second it turned convenient to treat me like staff instead. I had a precise sense of what that word is worth in the mouth of a powerful family. It weighs nothing and it weighs everything, and neither of those numbers is safe to stand on for long. Kaori walked me out afterward, which she was under no obligation to do. She had delivered the letter herself the day before. Now she delivered her own opinion in the elevator, where no record runs. Off the record, and against my own interest, she said, "Read it twice before you let it flatter you. It is the best offer you will ever get from people who spent a year pretending you were furniture. That is precisely why it is dangerous. A cage with a view is still a cage," she said, watching the floor numbers instead of my face. "And you are the kind of man who would redecorate one for a decade before admitting he could simply open the door. Do not do that here. I respect you too much to watch it." Reika made her own case that evening, and hers was the hard one, because she was not aboard and she was not wrong. She found me on neutral ground, a bench near the water where neither of us held any power to perform for anyone. "Take it," she said, "not for them, for the work. You could save Hikari by Friday and build 10 more real centers by spring, and you know that you could." "I know I could," I said. "That is the entire problem, and I need you to sit here with why." "Then explain it to me," she said, "because from where I sit I see the man I love handed a chance to stop scraping and build at scale, with resources he earned a decade ago, and I do not understand what is wrong with his face right now. Because the day I take that letter, I work for you," I said, "or for your board, which for a man with no name of his own is the same thing wearing a better coat. And the second I work for you, we stop being what we are on this bench tonight," I said. "You become the woman who saved the stray, I become the stray. And every good thing between us gets a small receipt stapled to the back of it." "I spent 7 years as somebody's favor," I said. I set it down on a ballroom floor and walked out. "If I sign that letter, I am a favor again, except this one arrives with a parking space and dental." She went quiet for a while. The good kind of quiet, the kind that is thinking instead of reloading. "So you would refuse the money," she said, "and let real programs sweat, to protect a feeling you have about yourself." "No," I said. "I would refuse the leash and find the money another way, so that when I stand beside you, I am standing on my own feet, not being held up on yours. You, of every person alive, know the difference between those two things. You spent your whole life surrounded by men who could not tell them apart," I said. "I will not become one of them just because, this time, the hand on the leash is yours, and it is gentle, and I would follow it anywhere." She looked at the water a long moment. Then she nodded once, with the small economy she reserves for things she has decided to mean. "All right," she said, "then do not take it. Show me the other way. I would rather have the man than the employee." I said no to the board in writing, which felt like leaping out of a plane I had spent my whole life begging to be allowed aboard. A bare no is easy and useless, so I refused to stop at one. I told them the thing I would build instead, because a shut door with nothing behind it is only a sulk in expensive lettering. I would open an independent youth center on its own footing, staffed by the people who do the work with their own hands. Takamori could partner with it, fund a single share, and hang its name on a small plaque by the door as one supporter among several. But it would not own the place, and it would never again own me. I said it as a negotiation between equals and not a plea from a barred man on a sidewalk, and I heard the difference land in my own voice while I spoke. To my genuine surprise, most of the board took the deal. A company caught laundering money through an empty room develops a sharp, sudden appetite to be photographed beside a real one it cannot control. For once, even my leverage was clean, and I had spent a whole year making certain it would be. We opened the doors of the Kakehashi Youth Center on a gray Saturday, which suited it, because not one thing about the place had been built for a camera. Kakehashi means bridge. Haruto chose the name, then pretended he had not spent a solid week arriving at it, and went cold and stiff whenever anyone said it too casually near him. The first film ever made, there ran 30 seconds, shot on Sora's cracked phone, and it broke every single rule Meridian ever sold to a client. It named the kids. It named their projects out loud, one by one. It showed the heater getting fixed, a homework table with old gum stuck under the lip, and Emmy teaching a smaller girl to solder a board without setting either either of them on fire. It was clumsy and loud and specific and entirely true. 2 minutes of pretty light with no living child inside it. That was the other place, the one with the banner and the $400,000 that traveled in a circle. This one was all children and almost no pretty light whatsoever. A donated hall with mismatched chairs, a heater with strong opinions, and a sign cut from cardboard. And it was, with no competition at all, the most real thing these hands have ever helped put together. The kids ran the tour themselves, because I had learned at a public forum months ago never to speak for them when they can speak for themselves. Sora showed a reporter the soldering station and did not use the word synergy even once, and I have rarely been prouder of a sentence left unspoken. Kari came to the opening, which she was under no obligation to do. She waited in the doorway, in a coat worth more than the heater, surveyed the crooked chairs and the marker sign, and delivered the driest blessing of my life. It is structurally sound, correctly staffed, and legally boring, she said. I reviewed it myself. There is nothing here to launder and nothing here to fake. Congratulations. It is the least impressive room I have ever been proud to stand in. Mickey set up Hikari in the back 2 afternoons a week, out of any Nervous Foundation's reach, funded by people who had shaken the kids' hands themselves. She never thanked me for it once, which was the highest praise the woman has. Thanking me would have meant I had done it for her, to be the hero of her story a second time. She let me do it with her instead, at her elbow, on her own terms, and that correction weighed more than any front page ever could. Haruto ran the folding chairs naturally. He cried during the ribbon, denied it flatly, blamed the cold air coming off the water, and every one of us agreed on the spot to believe that particular lie for the rest of our lives. Reika came too. She did not arrive as a CEO cutting a ribbon, and she did not arrive as a donor buying a plaque. She came as a woman who showed up to a thing her partner built, and stood at the back so the kids would stay the story. A reporter found her anyway and asked for a quote about her role in the center. She said only, "This is his. I am a guest here," then stepped back out of the light and left it precisely there. That, in the end, was the whole answer to the question I had been carrying since the bench. She let me build a thing she could not run, and she loved me in front of the cameras without once dressing it up as a rescue. Later, outside, she took my hand, and nothing in it felt like being reached down for from a height. It felt like two people who had each walked a long, separate road to end on the same square of cold pavement. Equals then, she said, because she is precise even about feelings, and especially about the ones that matter most. Equals, I said, you run an empire. I run a hall with a heater that works 2 days out of 3. When we help each other, it is a trade and not a favor. Nobody owes anybody. That is the only way I know to keep you and keep myself at the same time. I never once wanted you to disappear, she said. I spent a lifetime around people who vanished into me and called the vanishing devotion. You are the first who kept his own edges. Do not lose them now, and least of all to me. Yuna came in the 3rd week, which took more nerve than the stage had, because a stage at least gives you lights to hide inside, and a plain Tuesday afternoon offers you none of them. She asked for nothing, and I offered her nothing. She stood in the doorway and watched what a real version of her own worst lie could have been, and something in her face came apart without a sound, then set itself back together a little more honestly than before. Could I help with the little ones sometimes? She asked. Not as a Takamori, not for a photograph. Hands, that is all. I will mop. I turn out to be good at mopping. I have collected a number of humble skills lately, mostly against my will. You can earn your way in like everyone else who comes through that door, I said. No name buys a shortcut in this building. That is more or less the whole point of the place, if it has one. That is fair, she said, and she meant it. And in 7 years, it was the first fair thing she had ever taken from me without a fight in front of it. It was a narrow door. It was a real one. She walked through it on the door's terms, and not on the strength of her name. I understand a thing now that I could not have explained in that ballroom 3 hours early in a rented tuxedo, fixing a corrupt video for the woman who called me her free personal assistant. Being needed is not the same as being valued, and being valued is not the same as being loved. And I spent 7 years accepting the first as though it were the third, and calling the ache it left me loyalty. I stopped being the free favor. Then I turned down the paid one too, which was somehow harder, because it came from the very people I had wanted my whole life to be seen by. I built a hall with my name spelled right on a cardboard sign, and I let the woman at the top of the world love me across a table instead of down from a balcony. They used to call me only when something was on fire. Now they call when they want to build a thing that will still be standing in 10 years, and I get to answer yes or no or not like that, because the person doing the choosing is me. The empty lab had a banner and no children in it. My hall has 30 children and a heater that works when it is in the mood. I know which one is the future because I am standing in it. And for once, nobody had to ask me to be here. I am not anyone's favor anymore. I checked twice, and then I checked the name on the sign. It cost me 7 years, 1 empty room, and the nerve to say no to the only people who ever got around to saying yes. I would pay it again tomorrow, and I would not haggle over the price.
And that is where Ren's story ends. Not with a rescue, but with a choice. He learned that being needed is not the same as being valued, and that real love should never ask you to disappear inside someone else's world. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about love, betrayal, and finding your own worth. And tell us in the comments, would you have had the courage to say no to the person you loved in order to keep yourself? See you in the next story.